Testing newfound skill. Taking a step forward, I slowly bring my hand up and poke it. Julius looks up at me. What are you doing? I look up at Julius. I'm touching it. Why are you touching it? I wanted to see if it would pop or something. Julius looks back down at the orb. Where my finger was in the orb. What did you do? I asked him. I just condensed my power into a ball. Julius said. While my finger was still in the orb, I could feel a weird tingling feeling on the tip of my finger, the same feeling you would get when you touched those electric ball lamps. I think they were called a plasma ball lamp, where when you touched it with your fingers, you would feel slight electric shocks, but this feeling was lighter, and barely noticeable. Looking back up at Julius, the first asked. Do you think this will work? Julius just shrugged his shoulders. I don't know, I guess that if I condensed my power into a small orb it might be enough to keep them from entering our minds. What is the meaning of this? Amen said from over my shoulder. Without turning, I raise a finger and say. One moment. I heard the scoff, but decided to ignore the prick for the moment. Let's test it now. Now? Julius asked, confused. Nodding my head. Better now than later. Julius looked over my shoulder. What about them? I chuckled at his words. It won't matter, when we go to see the Volturi, your powers will be seen, so there's no point in hiding it. And if I had to guess, they are going to test us and force you to show any powers you might have. Julius nodded his head. How do you want to test it? Julius asked. Move the orb so it can surround your head, but make it a bit bigger so it can surround your head whole. I say, taking a step back, I watch as the orb slowly raised up then towards Julius's head, all the while it slowly expands until it is a little larger than Julius's head. It was interesting to see the orb move and expand. It was almost completely invisible, but the candle flame's flickering rays shined off the orb, like a clear soap bubble that had a mind of its own. The orb moved up and slowly, it enveloped his head. I couldn't stop the chuckle that escaped my lips, as I saw Julius now. It looked like he was wearing a small space helmet. Before Julius could ask what was so funny, Amen broke into the conversation again. What is that? He asked, stepping next to me, to see the orb surrounding Julius's head. It's his ability. I say, looking over and down at Amen. What? Making bubbles? I shook my head. No, it's something called telekinesis. Amen looked at me. And what exactly is this telekinesis? He asked, stumbling over the unfamiliar word. It's telekinesis, and what it is a psychic ability. It's the ability to move or manipulate objects using the power of the mind, without any physical contact. In other words, it is the ability to control and influence the physical world through the sheer force of one's thoughts. He can exert his mental energy to manipulate objects, such as making them levitate, move, or even break. But what he's doing now is he has condensed his telekinesis down and into an orb that we can place around their heads to make small mental shields. I said, looking down at him again. Amen's eyes were wide with shock as he stared at the glimmering ball around Julius's head. And it works? He asked, now seeming excited. That's what we were about to figure out before you interfered. I said, looking back up at Julius. How does it feel around your head? Julius let out a small chuckle. It tingles, he said, as he let out a small laugh. Well, I guess that's good. How is your control over it? Steady, I barely need to concentrate on it. It's like I'm just holding the shape of it, keeping the telekinesis energy inside of it. I nod my head, and scratch my chin. So let's test this, I say, looking at Jane. Let's see if he can feel anything. Jane turned to look at Julius with a devilish smile on her face. The small hint of terror on Julius' face was very amusing to see. More than once had Julius been the target to Jane's mental fire ability, and knew well how much it hurt. Looking Julius in the eyes, Jane said one simple word, pain. And, nothing happened. Julius just stood there looking confused and relieved. Looking at me, he said. I guess it works. Try a few more times. I want to see if it continues to work or if it wears down after multiple mental attacks. And so, turning to face each other again, Jane said, pain. And again nothing happened. Keep going at least 10 times. If nothing happens, then we should be good. What is her ability? Amen asked, pointing a finger at Jane. Jane possesses a unique power we call pain illusion. Her power allows her to create the illusion of intense physical pain in the minds of her targets, even though no actual physical harm is done. She can incapacitate and immobilize her opponents with excruciating agony. It supposedly feels like you are being burned alive, or that's what I have been told, I said, as I continued to watch Jane and Julius test the new mind shield. Incredible, both of them are incredible. Amin said as he continued to watch them as well. You do know that Arrow will want them, don't you? He said, not looking at me. I do, that's why we came here. We wanted to know if you might have a way to block the Volturi from their minds, but if you two were manipulated then I'm guessing you don't. Amin shook his head. No I don't, although I wish I did, I could have possibly saved my coven if I did. He said in a somber tone. No you couldn't have. Amin looked over at me with a confused expression. What do you mean? You were an example, for the rest of the covens that exist, no matter what you were doomed, the reason it was you, was because you weren't as big as the Romanian coven, who is a real threat to the Volturi's rule. You were the second biggest, with no vampires with combative abilities, they knew they could take you down, getting rid of a possible threat, while making you an example. Amin stared at me for a moment, before he bowed his head. I guessed as much, the only reason they let me live was because of my ties to the other covens I had been close to. They guessed as long as I was alive the other covens wouldn't band together and fight them. Before they took on the Romanian coven, the last thing they wanted was to fight two wars at once, and as it turned out they were correct, all the other covens cared about was my influence here in Egypt, allowing them to make money in trade deals and insider information that I have here. They didn't care if my coven was gone, just that I lived. Just then I heard a small squeal. Turning my head I saw Julius staggering backwards. How many was that? I asked. That was 7 inches, Jane said, as she helped Julius to stabilize himself, and not fall over, as the pain washed over him. So the shield wears down after a few mental attacks. I said, as Julius finally became stable on his feet. Yes, but I can feel the attacks on it. After every attack a small amount of the energy that's contained in the orb leaves, but I'm sure if I replenish the energy after every attack we should be okay. He said, giving me a thumbs up. The thumbs up was something I showed him after doing it by accident when he asked to read some of my scrolls. At first he was confused by it, because all he knew it to mean was when gladiators wanted mercy. After explaining how I used it, I have begun to see him using it more and more over time. That's good, it means no matter what you will be shielded from any mental attacks, but first we need to figure something out about the size. We don't want them to be able to see that you have that around your head, but I'm sure after some training you will figure something out. I said. Turning to Amin, I saw that Kebi was now standing next to him. I guess it's time for us to leave, and let you get back to your solitude. I say, putting out a hand to shake. Amin slowly grabbed my hand. Sorry for my reaction, but can you blame me? I thought you were just a regular human man all those years ago who was long dead, then out of nowhere over 1,000 years later you knock on my door. He said with a small smile. I can now see how that might spook you. Yes, sorry about that. I used to travel a lot, but over the last few hundred years I have been enjoying the quiet life, so I haven't had the chance to come down here and run into you. Amin chuckled. See, you understand, the quiet life seems to suit us, those who have seen as many years as us, me in particular. I am very old, too old. I couldn't stop the chuckle I let out. How old are you, Amin? I asked him. Oh, if I remember correctly, somewhere around 3,300 years old. He said with a shrug. My human years are slightly a blur that I don't remember. I chuckled again. Kid, I'm 4,800 years old. I say to Amin. Amin's mouth slowly opens in shock. No, you joke. He said, waving a hand in the air. No, he isn't. Julius said, as he stepped up next to me. He has kept personal journals about his travels and his life, all of which I have read, or to be more specific, I have started to read, but there are thousands of them. The look of shock on Amin's face was hysterical, and never before have I wanted a camera than now. And for my final words I couldn't help myself. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Words 1796. A place to rest, and old soldiers. Leaving Amin's we made our way back out into the crowded streets of Alexandria. By now it had already started to get darker, but the number of people walking the streets seemed to have only grown. So, leading the way, I expertly walked us through the throngs of people. So that was the Amin and Kebi you wrote about all those years ago, Julius asked me. Yup, I say, as I pass between a bunched up group of people. He doesn't seem like the person you wrote him to be back then. You said he was more confident and had an aura of power about him, but now he seems to lack all of that. That's because he's not the same man from then, Julius. Just like you're not the same person you were when we first met. You physically might be frozen in time, but that doesn't mean you're mentally frozen. We accumulate more experiences, become wiser, more knowledgeable, and gain a deeper understanding of the world around us, changing us through time. into completely different people than who we were. He lost his whole coven, he feels guilty that he lived, changing him through the experience. I see, Julius said, behind me as we walked. What are we going to do now? Head to the Volturi? Jane asked. Not yet, we need to give Julius time to practice using his new ability so he can shield the both of you before we head that way. Jane was more persistent about wanting to go to the Volturi, and I knew why. It was for her brother Alec, but I knew without a doubt that the Alec she knew was gone. His mind manipulated and morphed into a completely different person, a cold-hearted lap dog made to follow the orders of Arrow without hesitation or thought of his actions, the perfect vampire guard to do their dirty work. After an hour of walking, we finally arrived back at the ship. Are we staying here again? Jane complained. No, we are staying at a home I have. It's farther down the coast from here. It has some good wildlife there for the both of you to hunt, I said, stepping onto the ship. Thank everything that is good, being stuck in that cabin was starting to make me go crazy. Jane said, raising her hands to the sky like she was praying to the gods. Once we were all on the ship was pushed away from the dock, and we started to move. As we left we all stood at the ship's railing, Jane and Julius still wearing their cloaks, watching the other ships that were leaving the harbor. After a few minutes the Alexandria lighthouse came into sight. That's incredible, Jane said as she looked at the large structure. Just wait until we go to Rome, then you will see truly massive buildings. Julius said, standing next to Jane. You have told me stories about your home, but are there truly structures as big as you said? Jane asked Julius. Yes, there is. I cut in. Both Julius and Jane turned to look at me, as I leaned both elbows on the wooden railing of the ship. There once stood a structure called the Colossus of Rhodes. It was built in Greece, right by a harbor named Rhodes. It was a massive statue of the Greek sun god. Not as tall as the lighthouse, but this statue stood over 100 feet tall and had a copper crown that when the sun hit it just right, it shined bright, as if it was on fire. You could see it at great distances at sea. Really? Jane asked with excitement. Can we go and see it someday? She asked. I wish we could, but it was destroyed many years ago. Ah, she said, with a frown. But there are still many things we could go and see someday. After everything is done with the Volturi and the Romanian coven we can take a few years off to relax and explore. Like what? She asked. I call them the wonders of the world. The wonders of the known world for me, at first would have been the 7 wonders of the ancient world, which I saw most of, but like most things, almost all of them were gone, destroyed by war, or natural disasters, like earthquakes, but there were still many things for them to see. Like the horse race arena I had built, the Imperator Arena, Emperor's Arena, as it became known, was the largest structure in Rome. Of course there was plenty of other large structures, but mine was on a whole different level, and I'm sure in later years, it will be on the 7 wonders of the world list. For the next few hours, as we stood on the deck of the ship, I told both Julius and Jane about the wonders of the ancient world, and how incredible they were to see with my own eyes. Finally, after I finished telling them about the hanging garden of the Byzantines, my small villa came into view. The small villa was in the Roman fashion, built during the rule of Rome. These kinds of villas were popular with the wealthy. Compared to what I lived in back by London, this was a small palace. It was a single-story villa, square-shaped with a courtyard in the middle, with the inside an open design that allowed the cool breeze to come in, 7 bedrooms, and a wash pool. It was perfect for me. I've had it since the start of the construction on the Gringotts Bank in Alexandria, but I haven't come back since it finished. Luckily I had employees that would come back every week to make sure it stayed clean. It also has a small group of guards here that made sure it wasn't robbed, or vandalized. Slowly the ship approached the small dock that had a path up to the villa. As the ship docked, I saw a group of people standing at the top of the bath, all men wearing swords and breastplates in the old legionaries' fashion, as well as royal purple capes, signifying them as my bank guards. Once the ship was tied to the dock, we stepped off the ship. That's strange, Julius said to my side. What is? I asked him. Not a one of them looks to be under the age 50. He said as he looked at the guards. That's because not one of them is under the age of 50. I said in response. Most of them are in their later years, some to OID to continue with their duties at the bank, and don't want to retire, and a few who sustained injuries, we continue to employ, so instead of throwing them out, without a job or anywhere to go, I have the older guards come to the properties I have all over the world and guard them. It's an easy job that pays, as well as a home for them to stay. I say as we walk up the path to the guards. A few yards from the group of 10 guards, one of them steps forward. Stop, who goes? He looked to be mid-50s with salt and pepper hair, clean shaven, around 6 feet tall, and in great shape for his age. Reaching into one of my pockets, I pull out my gold card, and hold it up so he could see the symbol on the card. All the men, almost in sync, went to attention. "Sir," said the man who had stepped forward to stop us. Stepping forward, I put out my hand to shake his. "Nice to meet you, I'm Adam," I say, as his meaty hand swallowed mine almost whole. "Hello, sir, I am Marcus Augusta," said the large man. Short chapter today. Merry Christmas, everyone. Please let me know if there are any problems with this chapter. It was rushed. Back to Rome. 2 weeks later. At the moment we are all in the courtyard of my property, me, Julius and Jane. I was currently juggling 4 balls of hard metal. I know what you are thinking. Why exactly are you juggling 4 balls of metal? Well, the reason why is because at the moment we are testing Julius's shields. It only took Julius a week to almost master his mental shielding ability. Now he was able to shield himself and Jane at the same time while also being able to use his telekinetic abilities. And now we were doing a little extracurricular work. I figured if Julius can make a mental shield, he could also make a regular shield using his telekinesis. And so far we have made big strides in this ability. At the beginning Julius was only able to make a small shield the size of a frisbee, but now he is able to make one big enough to cover himself whole. Anything bigger and his mental shield would start to weaken. "Are you ready?" I called out to Julius. "Yeah, I'm ready." In a blur of motion, the metallic balls the size of pool balls were launched towards the still figure of Julius. Like gunshots, the metal balls smash into the nearly invisible wall. Unlike the mental shields Julius can make, which is mostly made out of the energy his ability makes, this kind of shield has a slight smoky look to it. And like the many times before, the metal orbs came to a dead stop when they hit Julius's shield, then dropped to the ground, making clunk sounds as they hit the ground. "Not bad," I say, as Julius dispersed his shield. "I don't think I could do much better while keeping our mental shields in place," he said as he pointed his finger at Jane, who was at the moment reading one of the scrolls one had brought on our trip. Looking at them you couldn't see the orbs that were the mental shields Julius made, unlike before where it looked like small glass space helmets that reflected light around their heads. Now it was impossible to see. Julius had it to perfection, where it was molded to your face, and right under the skin so it wouldn't reflect light. As we were taking a break under some shade, one of the guards came out of one of the doors and made his way towards us. Stopping next to where I was seated, he came to attention and held out his hand, which had a piece of paper in it. Taking the paper I dismissed him, and opened the letter. On the top of the paper was the symbol for the Roman bank head. This letter was one that I was expecting. The day after arriving here at this home, I sent a letter to the Roman bank head, and asked him to send people to watch the Volturi, and to let me know when there are large movements made by the Volturi, and it seems, there must have been something to happen. "Sir, the spies I have sent out at your request have sent word to me of a large gathering of people in Voltoria, all of which they noted as being perfect beings who wear black and red cloaks. It has also been noted that in the surrounding areas there has been a large number of people going missing. Some are found, others seem to just go missing in the night. Augusta." Folding the letter back up, I couldn't stop the smile that spread across my face. Noting the smile, Julius asked, "Was that the response from the Rome bank?" I nodded my head. That it was. It seems the Volturi have started to gather their forces in preparation for the fight. "Does this mean we will be leaving soon?" Jane asked. "Yes, we will be leaving tomorrow." And with that started the flurry of preparation for the leave. Packing our belongings, we were ready by the next morning. Back in the dark cabin that was our new home for the voyage back to Rome, we all did our own thing to pass the time, which for all of us, was reading. It took 4 days to make it to the main Rome ports. Unlike many other places, Rome's ports were massive, with hundreds of ships coming in and leaving almost constantly, even after falling to the Germanic tribes and a large part of Rome falling, due to war, fire and other natural disasters. But through all of that, Rome still stood as one of the world's largest hubs for trade, with ships coming from all over to trade their goods. Standing on the deck of the ship, Jane and I looked out at the massive swarm of moving ships, while Julius packed up his belongings for when we left the ship. "What do you think will happen?" Jane asked me. I looked over at her. "What do you mean? When we meet the Volturi, what do you think will happen?" I looked back at the ships again and thought for a moment. "I think the Volturi will try to do something to anger you, and make you attack them, possibly using your brother to do so." "My brother? Why would he help them? For all he knows I'm long dead." Jane asked, looking up at me. I'm sure he knows that you are alive. Jane stood dead still, as she processed my words. Then why is he helping them? Jane asked in a quiet, angry voice. Because to him, what he's doing now doesn't seem wrong. I don't understand. It's the whole reason Julius has been training so hard with his mental shields. The Volturi has a member that can make and change your emotional ties to people, to your brother, no matter what the Volturi does, or makes him do, they are always in the right. But he's my brother, I'm sure as soon as he sees that I'm alive he will change. I shook my head. It doesn't work that way. Even if we kill the vampire that changed him, your brother will stay the same as he is now. Before we could continue the conversation, Julius came to the top deck, and approached us. I swear, this will be the last time I'm on a ship for the next 100 years, Julius complained as he approached. Well, we could have swam. I said in response. PFF swam, that would have been twice as terrible, swimming for days on end, constantly wet, not thanks, I would rather be on the ship that smells like sweat, shit, and other terrible things. I laughed. Well, we are almost done with this trip. I said as we all turned to look out at the port. This chapter is the last chapter, before the war with the Romanian arc starts. Meeting the Volturi. Wow, was all my brain could think as I walked the cramped streets of Rome once again. Following behind me was Julius and Jane, both wearing their white cloaks over their faces. Julius walked at a steady pace, unconcerned of his surroundings, the sights and smells something he was used to seeing. Jane, on the other hand, was a different story. Both Alexandria and now Rome were whole new experiences for her. A girl born in a small village north of Londinium, she had never left the village her whole life until she was saved by me and Julius. Her head turned in every direction as she absorbed her new surroundings, and smells that came with it. This is where you were born? Jane asked Julius. Yes, I was born farther to the east, but yes, Rome was my home. He said, looking at her with a smile on his face. Something I've picked up on more so lately was the bond both Jane and Julius were developing. For a long time, Jane was distant from both me and Julius. Her hatred for humans divided them, but ever since I strongly persuaded her into changing her views of humans, they have grown close, very close. They weren't in a relationship yet, that much I knew. I would hear it, but in my little expertise in the field of love, told me it was bound to happen, and the only thing keeping them apart was the fear they felt for meeting with the Volturi, and the vampire war that was about to be fought. They feared losing one another in the fight to come. It was in the hope that it would hurt less if they weren't in a relationship when one of them died. But I could be wrong. I haven't been in a relationship for over 5,000 years, so what do I know about it? As we were walking, you could see a massive structure in the distance in front of us, and as soon as Jane saw it, she had to ask. What is that? She asked in an awestruck tone. That would be my horse chariot arena, the Imperator Harena, Emperor's arena. I said, looking over my shoulder at her. How incredible, she said as she looked at it. I'm a little surprised it's still standing, to be honest. Why? Jane asked. Well, it's a few hundred years old now, and still in use, it's bound to be in some bad shape. I said, as I looked at the structure from a distance, trying to see if I could see any cracks. It's actually in pretty good shape, Julius said. Turning to look at him, I asked. And how would you know? Julius shot me a wide smile. I get reports every new moon. Anytime there is any damage, I approve funds for repairs. I nodded my head, then shrugged my shoulders. In all truth, I forgot about it for about 100 years. How could you forget something like this? Jane asked. I chuckled. Well, when we had it built, it was just a way for us to get rid of some money. By giving it to the people that needed it, that being the workers, it gave jobs to almost 2 generations of people. Jane looked at the back of my head with wide eyes. How much gold do you have? Too much. Julius answered her question with a chuckle. Too damn much. After a few more hours of walking, we made it to my old villa where we spent the night, or I spent the night. Jane and Julius went off to hunt. The next morning, we headed north. Thanks to our speed, we ate up the miles. The only problem was the fact that I'm still practically a human with human needs, so every now and then we would need to stop so I could eat or get a drink, and at night I needed to sleep, so with me holding the group back, we made it to Volterra in 4 days. Long gone was the town with only one stone building, with the rest being small wooden huts. Now Volterra was a large city of its time with stone buildings and homes. I haven't been here for the last 100 years or so, but over the years I had been here to check on the Volturi. I had seen the town grow. Now most of the buildings were made of stone, with clay roofing. As we walked up the steep hill road that led to the city, I spoke to Jane and Julius. Remember what I have told the both of you, they will try to anger you, make you do something with your powers, but you can't show them your powers, if you do Arrow will try and make you come to his side. I said, stopping to look at the both of them. And let me do all the talking, the both of you just need to stay close to me, and to stay silent no matter what is said. Looking at Julius the first say, now would be a good time to put on the mental shields. Julius nodded his head, and closed his eyes, and in a matter of seconds both of them had the shields in place. Ready? I asked them. Both Jane and Julius nodded their heads in the affirmative. So with a nod of my own head we continued up the cobbled road. And within half an hour we were walking the heavily populated streets of Volterra. I led Jane and Julius expertly through the streets to the Volturi's headquarters. It wasn't hard to do since it's been their headquarters since they came here. The only difference was that their headquarters has been improved greatly over the years into a small castle. Finally, after turning a corner it came into sight, the large stone building smack dab in the middle of the city. With confident steps, I led Julius and Jane to the large metal doors. As we approached I could see a cloaked person standing in the shade the large building gave by the door. As we came closer the person took a slight step forward away from the wall he was leaning against. Stopping before the steps that lead to the door, I waited for the person to speak. And like I knew they would, the person spoke first. What do you want? The man said in a deep gruff voice. I'm here to see the Volturi. What business do you have with the Volturi? Just tell them Adam is here, they will understand. The cloaked man stayed silent for a moment before taking a step back, and knocking on the large metal doors twice. A moment later they opened slightly, and he had a quick conversation with someone on the other side of the door. Once done the door was closed and the awkward silence began. As we waited I looked at the cloaked figure. He was new, or relatively new. It had been a while since I ran into any of the Volturi members, or came to check in with the Volturi. The last time was when we saved Jane, and the members there were the Volturi and their personal guards, not the freshly made vampires. At least he wasn't trying and failing to intimidate me like the vampire who was on guard duty the first time I met the Volturi. After a few more minutes, the doors opened again, this time fully, revealing a nondescript female vampire, who wore the hood of her cloak down, revealing her perfect porcelain skin, and raven black hair. Please follow me, she said, taking a step to the side to allow us entrance. Taking the steps up, we entered the half-castle. The inside was dark and gloomy, candles the only light, leaving long shadows and dark corners. The female vampire led us through a long maze of hallways, past works of art on the walls, as well as stone statues that lined some of the walls. After a few minutes of walking, we finally arrived at another pair of large metal doors. They are waiting for you, the female vampire said as she pushed one of the doors open, with almost no effort. Without giving her a second glance, I stepped past her, and into the large throne room. The soft footsteps of Jane and Julius behind me were the only confirmation that they were following me. Stepping in I looked around, clocking every person in the room. To one side of the throne room was the massive 6'7" figure of Felix. Next to him was a smaller man, by the name of Afton. On the other side of the room were two vampires I have never seen before. Both were also men, short and nondescript. And of course like before in their thrones were the Volturi heads, Arrow, Marcus, and Keys. Walking steadily to the center of the room, I looked at the three of them without an ounce of fear in me or my eyes. Ah, if it isn't our oldest friend Adam. Arrow said, in his snarky tone. I wouldn't say friend, we are acquaintances, nothing more, nothing less. Arrow let out a chuckle. Why of course Adam, he said, as he tapped one of his fingers to his gold throne. Looking over my shoulder Arrow spoke again. Ah, and I see you brought some friends. They are members of my own coven. How preposterous. Keys cut in. In what way? I asked. You are no vampire. Clearly I am not, but I am immortal like a vampire. I am as strong and as fast as a vampire. Who says I cannot have a coven like a vampire? Humans are fallible, which you are. It takes a vampire to run a coven without error. He snapped. I let out a chuckle. So you call yourself infallible? If so, that is your greatest weakness. Because you do make mistakes. In what way? Marcus finally spoke. Let me break it down for you Barney style, I said with a chuckle that only I would understand. You have limited knowledge, you don't possess complete knowledge or understanding of all situations and individuals, it's impossible to. You rely on your own experiences, interpretations, and information sources, which can lead to errors in judgment. Second, subjectivity, your decisions are influenced by personal biases, beliefs, and emotions. which can cloud your judgments and prevent all of you from making objective and impartial decisions. Then my favorite is your power dynamic. Your authority and power has led all of you to become arrogant with a sense of invincibility, which clearly makes all of you overconfident and blind to your own weaknesses, making you susceptible to mistakes or miscalculations. Then there's the changing circumstances. The world is constantly evolving, and new challenges and threats can emerge that you, the Volturi, may not be fully prepared for. Your strategies and methods will become outdated or ineffective in the face of these changes. And last but not least, the external opposition. Since you have formed the Volturi, you have been fighting tooth and nail for every ounce of power you have received. But come on, how long will you keep pushing your luck before the other vampire covens get tired of your rule and oppression before they band together to take you down? The throne room was dead silent as I finished my long rant. For a long full minute not a sound was made by anyone in the throne room, while a look of bewilderment grew on the faces of the three Volturi heads. Looking at Keys the first said, "If you wish I could continue." "I don't believe that will be necessary," Arrow said, raising one of his hands. After another moment of getting themselves mentally on track, after the hard facts I just dropped on their heads, Arrow spoke again. "And what brings you here, Adam?" "You know why I am here, Arrow." "Unfortunately I don't," he said, leaning back in his chair. I let out a sigh. "I know you are gathering your forces, which I'm guessing is to take on the Romanian coven, and like I told you all those years ago, I'm going to help take them down." Once again, Arrow tapped a finger to his throne. "And why should I allow you to go?" I laughed. "Like you could stop me from going. And let's be honest, Arrow, you could use every extra weapon on your side as you can get." A corner of Arrow's face rose slightly in a small smile. "True. But how am I to know that your friends are strong enough to hold up in a fight?" he asked, with a small smile on his lips. I smirked. "The only way you will find out is on the battlefield." A sneer rose on Keys's face. "This is no game, we must know the powers of those we are bringing, we can't afford any weak links." He spat. I pointed at myself. "Do you consider that I am weak link?" He didn't respond. "I have trained them well, and I know I can trust them, and that's all that matters." Keys opened his mouth to speak again, but was cut off by Arrow's raised hand. Then he turned his head to one of the nondescript vampires that was to our sides and behind us. In a blurry, he was gone, and out the large metal doors. Confused at the vampire's actions, I turned my head slightly to look at the large doors that were now slightly opened. A moment later the sounds of footsteps could be heard in the hallway. And a moment later walked in Alec, Jane's brother. Word 2330. If there are any problems with the chapter, please let me know so I can fix them. That hurt. Alec walked into the large room with a steady stride, his footfalls making hard thuds on the marble floor. Out of the corner of my eyes I saw Jane twitch slightly to move to her brother, but before she could make a move, she went completely still again. Looking at Julius, he gave me a slight nod of his head. Me and Julius knew that when Jane saw her brother she would react. We didn't know what she would do, but we thought it best to stop her before she even approached him, so me and Julius decided to stop her with Julius's telekinetic powers holding her in place before anything could happen. Leaving my thoughts, I looked back at Alec. I watched as he approached the seated Volturi, going up the few steps that raised the Volturi above any they were talking to. Alec stopped and stood right behind Arrow's gold and black throne. I couldn't stop the chuckle that fell from my lips. "And you attempt to bait us?" I said, putting both of my hands behind me. With a small grin Arrow spoke. "Bait you? No, I only wish for a reunion of two lost family members." PFF'd. "You are not as funny as you might think, Arrow," I said. "Oh, I think I have my moments." Pointing a finger at Alec's emotionless face I say. "Maybe it would be a good reunion of two siblings, if he was still her brother." Turning his head Arrow looked at Alec then back to us. "He is clearly her brother, Adam." "No he isn't, he isn't even a shell of the same person he once was. You used your manipulation bitch to alter his mind, making him your perfect weapon, killing the old Alec." Arrow shrugged at my words. "So what? We gave him a purpose, an opportunity to be a part of something bigger than he ever would have in that run-down village that was ready to kill him. You let him be a part of something bigger than himself," I said with a big laugh. "What a jest. You didn't give him anything. All you did was take from him. You took him away from his sister. You took away his free will. You took away what makes him himself," I said, slowly getting louder and louder, until I was yelling at them. Not because I was mad, but to intimidate them. The Volturi have been getting bolder since I haven't been checking up with them lately, which made them only get more confident. Chuckling, Arrow looked over my shoulder at Jane, who hadn't moved since Alec entered, and Julius stopped her. And you, do you have anything to say? Arrow asked. When Jane stayed still, Arrow continued. No, well then, that's fine. I could see the frustration starting to creep into his movements because we refused to rise to the bait, the tapping of his finger on his throne, or the unusual amount of movements he was making. When will we be leaving? I finally asked. The room went silent for another moment before Arrow spoke again. In 2 days, once we receive the needed stock for our journey, we will be leaving. I knew what he meant by stock. It was the slaves the Volturi will be using on the trip. The reason why was because while they were traveling, the number of vampires that the Volturi had in their army could wipe out entire villages. Long ago they started buying older criminals or those who surrendered in war and became slaves. The Volturi bought the slaves from some king in the Far East at a cheap price, giving the Volturi good sustenance for their army, while not emptying half a region of its human life. Of course, if they wished they could just kill villages for their food, but the Volturi had already started pressuring other covens to go to ground and become shadows to the world, and to start following the rules of the Volturi. In doing so, the Volturi had to follow their own rules as well, because they knew if they forced all the coven to follow rules that they themselves neglect, it could start wars that they would rather not have. If large amounts of villages were drunk dry, that might cause problems from some king or another, and with Christianity becoming so big, it wouldn't take much for some religious king to start a holy war with vampire kind because he thinks they are the spawn of the devil. So to avoid that and to stay under the radar, the Volturi turned to another disgusting practice, slavery. Buying humans none would miss by the hundreds. The Volturi would take them like a herd of cattle on their march to war, or when they went to take down one coven or another. The only time they would do so would be when all of the Volturi were gathered together for a fight. If it was just the Volturi heads and their guards, it was unneeded. Not wanting to spend any more time here than needed, I turned to leave. Turning, I saw Julius standing next to Jane with a hand on her shoulder, while giving her the use of her legs back so she could walk. Following behind me, we walked calmly to the large metal doors, but in Arrow fashion he spoke again. And who said you could leave? He said in an apathetic tone. Stopping dead in my tracks, I let out a sigh. This bitch, I thought. Turning around, I looked back up at the Volturi heads. I could see the smile on Eros and Keys's faces, while Marcus just sat there looking like he wanted to be dead. But before I could get a word out, both of the nondescript vampires in the corner of the throne room moved. In blurs, both came towards me at full speed. Not needing to think about my actions, I launched myself at them as well, meeting them halfway. My speed was faster than any vampire any of them had seen, shocking all in the room, even Julius and Jane. Because for the first time they had seen me go full out and using full force. Which surprised them even more. During all of their training together, both Julius and Jane thought that I was an opponent that could be defeated, but that my skills in combat is what always put me above them, at what they thought was a reachable distance, but instead was something they could only dream of. Now they saw it was never just the skill difference that let me surpass them, but instead the hidden power stored in me that gave me the advantage. In a blur of speed that even the present vampires almost missed, I appeared in front of the two vampires. With both hands out, I grabbed onto their faces, bringing them to a dead stop, or at least partially, because only the heads came to a stop, while their momentum carried their bodies forward, decapitating their heads from their bodies, their own speed tearing their heads off for me. Now with both heads in my hands I looked up at Arrow, but was only met with a black as night fog moving right for me. Dropping the heads I stood still. I watched the black fog surround me and circle around me, but as soon as the fog surrounded me, I started to chuckle. Because unlike what his powers might do to regular people or vampires, which was to take away all of their senses, like sight, touch, sound and smell, his powers didn't affect me. Instead it was like semi-black smoke that swirled around me. Yes, it was thick smoke, but I could still see through most of it. As the black fog swirled around me I waited for something to happen, and like I thought, a massive foot appeared through the fog. Reacting on instinct, I grabbed the foot before it could hit me, and pulled the owner of the foot into the smoke with me. As I pulled them into the smoke I saw that it was Felix. Well, hello there, big guy, I said, as I grabbed onto the collar of his clothes and launched him into the air and straight towards a wall. As he hit the wall the stone wall shook and a few chunks fell as he fell to the ground in clear pain. As he hit the wall the black smoke retreated back into Alec's hands. Turning I checked on Jane and Julius and saw that they were both still standing by the door. So turning back to the Volturi heads. If I can deal with your guards then trust me when I say my 2 coven members are more than enough for anyone. Arrow let out a laugh. But you are forgetting one. He said. And at that same moment a hand grabbed me from behind. A hand went around my back and grabbed onto my chin and pulled me back, and before I knew it I could feel teeth sinking into the flesh of my neck. Right. Datsu, yeah. The MC was finally bitten by a vampire. I'm sure you are wondering how this vampire was able to get close to the MC and bite him. Well, the vampire that bit him is Afton. He is the mate of mind manipulation vampire. His ability is psychic invisibility. So he can go invisible to others by altering if others can see him or not. Now in the book and movies it's a mental ability which Julius's shield should have been able to neglect and they should have seen him get close to the MC. But in this world I made it to where his ability is just self-invisibility, not an ability that needed to enter your mind to work so Julius and Jane couldn't see him. The reason I did it now was because I wanted him to get his powers before fighting the Romanian coven. Guess what his power will be here? Word 1700. Power. Third person POV. As the teeth bit into Adam's flesh a small splatter of blood entered the vampire's mouth, before he was ripped away from Adam by Julius's powers. As the vampire was ripped from Adam, the vampire's teeth removed a chunk from Adam's neck, while the hand that had grabbed onto Adam's face twisted Adam's head into a strange angle, staggering Adam. Adam stood in place for a moment as blood ran steadily down his neck. But before the eyes of the Volturi, they watched as the gushing wound knitted itself together in seconds. Then with a crack, Adam's head wiped forward and back into a proper position, but he didn't move, he just stood there as still as the dead. The vampire that bit Adam floated in the air by Julius, writhing and grunting midair in pain. Before anyone knew what was happening, the floating vampire started to flake into specks of dust. First slowly but in seconds the limbs started falling to the ground and exploding into a sparkling dust. And after 5 seconds the torso was gone and soon followed the head. The sparkling dust floated into the air causing the little light that filled the room to sparkle off the partials that floated in the air. What happened to the vampire took everyone's attention away from Adam who still had yet to move. Adam POV. System alert, system alert. Cell mutation detected by invasive substance, checking mutation properties, properties detected. This cell mutation will cause death. Cell crystallization. Cell reform. Cell restructuring into peak abilities. Dietary change to a blood-based diet where cells receive substance from said blood. Error could not be found. Host death must be avoided, cleansing invasive substances from host, error. Error could not be cleansed from the host's body. All other invasive changes have been cleansed from the host's body through system cell interference, closing off cells to mutation of invasive properties. Error unknown has been detected in the host's brain and cells, unable to cleanse error from host's body. Running diagnostics, brain frequency has altered, non-life threatening, or invasive to host, acceptance granted to error will be added to the system archive. What the fuck just happened? I thought as I felt something coursing through me. Turning my head I looked at Julius and Jane to make sure they were okay. As I looked at them I could see small sparkling specks floating through the room. It wasn't very hard to figure out what that was when I noticed the pile of sparkling dust at Julius's feet. Did you ground him to dust? How long was I out? I asked him, momentarily forgetting about the Volturi heads who were still in their thrones. I didn't, he just fell apart. Julius said. What? I asked, confused. He just appeared out of nowhere before I could react and bit you. He said. I pulled him off you in less than a second, but when I pulled him off of you he took a chunk of you with him, then in a matter of seconds he was, well, dust. Bringing my hand up I touched the side of my neck where I could feel the warm blood. My blood. I thought. I had never had a vampire drink my blood before so had no idea what would happen if one drank my blood, until now. My guess is the fact of the healing ability that is in me, from the cells from the skin the vampire tore away, along as in the blood the vampire consumed. My healing ability entering a dead being could only spell bad shit happening. Crack. Turning my head I saw Felix standing to his feet, making cracking sounds as he healed from him hitting the wall. Him making a sound reminded me of the Volturi who sat in their thrones and observed our actions, and what had happened. Turning my head I looked at them with a cold expression on my face, pissed at their actions. When that strange feeling started to make its presence known again. Like a tingling zap, the feeling shot from the tips of my toes to my skull, while a purple light started to glow from me. At the moment I couldn't tell where from, but somewhere I couldn't see. The purple light that came from me shined off the flakes of vampire that still floated in the air, causing the room to take on a purple hue. Fascinating. Arrow said with a deranged smile on his face as he watched me. But before Arrow could continue to enjoy the sight, a semi-clear purple shockwave escaped from me. Like a wave, the purple hue shot from me and into the world, causing the throne room to shake from the force of the shockwave, causing cracks to form on the walls of the room and floor, along with throwing everyone in the room back. The three Volturi heads were thrown through their thrones and back to land next to Alec, while Felix was thrown into the wall again. Thankfully Julius managed to throw up a shield before the shockwave hit him and Jane. While I on the other hand was burning alive. The feeling of fire mixed with lightning coursed through me. But in the middle of my torture another pulse shot out again doing more damage to the room. Host. Error has been identified. Molecular cell mutation, scanning mutation, mutation identified, mutation aura manipulation, abilities unknown, found. Cells have become aura charged allowing the host to manipulate one's own aura. Mutation acceptable. Now I would have heard the system say that if I wasn't in agonizing pain at the moment. Because at the moment there was nothing that filled my head but pain. After a few moments my pain reached an unbearable point of agony. I let out a blood-curtailing scream. And with one final shock wave of purple aura, that caused chunks to fall from the ceiling, it all came to an abrupt stop. Falling to my knees, I took deep breaths as I pushed the remaining twitches of pain to the back of my mind for later. Adam, I heard someone yell from behind me, I think it was Jane. But I was too tired to move at the moment to check. A second later I felt a hand grab onto my shoulder. Adam, are you alright? Julius asked. But I couldn't answer him at the moment, my body felt too tired to answer at the moment. Come on, we need to get him out of here. Julius said to Jane. Be careful not to touch his blood, you saw what it did to that other guy. Julius added to Jane. Slowly they lifted me up, Julius putting one of my arms around his neck to carry me out while Jane led the way out. As I was partially carried, dragged out, I thought about what the fuck just happened. Checking the interface I saw my system had a message on it. Slowly reading it, my jaw dropped. I got a superpower, I got a superpower. I mentally yelled in excitement. Aura manipulation. So let me go over some stuff that might be confusing. He is still human, the system purged the venom from his system but was unable to purge the power aspect of the venom. Arrow is super deranged and has some serious mental issues, he has a problem with anyone or any group that might be stronger than the Volturi, that's why he had his guards attack, because in his deranged mind he thought none could beat his strongest. Adam took them on so Julius and Jane wouldn't have to show their powers to the Volturi, but as shown Julius was forced to show his powers. Which may cause problems with Arrow in later years. Adam is still going to fight with the Volturi to take down the Romanian coven. But in this chapter, Julius and Jane thought it was a good idea to get Adam away from the Volturi. The reason Adam is joining with the Volturi to fight the Romanian coven was because to him it's a way to clean some of the blood of the villagers off his hands, he knows that the Volturi will win the fight, and we must also remember that the Volturi don't have Jane anymore so the fight might not turn out the same as the old world. If you have any more questions of things you don't understand please comment and I will try to reply to them and help. Word 1425. And Happy New Year. If there are any problems with the chapter please let me know and I will correct them soon. Retribution. Wait, I said to Julius who was still guiding me outside. What, are you okay? He asked in a worried tone. Yeah, I'm fine, I said, standing on my own feet again. What's wrong? Jane asked. Nothing's wrong, there's just one more thing I've gotta do. I said. What else is there to do, Adam? Julius asked, annoyed. Smirking, I told him. That's my business, you and Jane should head to the regroup area I showed the both of you, I'll be there soon. But, nothing, I just remembered I told Arrow something a while ago, and it seems I have to remind him, the both of you keep out of sight and move fast, if anyone tries to stop you use your powers. I told them, turning around to head back to the Volturi's throne room. As I walked back through the hallway I heard their fast footsteps as they ran full speed through the halls and out of here. With a steady stride I walked back into the large room, making sure to avoid the pile of vamp dust on the floor. As I came in I could see the Volturi heads just starting to get their feet back under them, and standing up. Small crack lines ran along their faces from the sheer force the waves hit them with. Felix on the other hand wasn't moving. Looking at him I could see that part of his head was missing, looking up I saw what did the damage. It was a touch holder that was embedded into the wall, he must have shot back and hit his head against it. Oh well, they will put him back together once I'm done here. Looking back at the Volturi leaders, a small smile spread across my face. I told you, Arrow. I told all of you if you fucked with me I would tear you to pieces, didn't I? I yelled to them as I slowly made my way closer to them. None of them answered as I went up the steps and past their broken thrones. I mean, really, is it that hard to get through your skulls that I'm stronger than you? I told you I'm much older than all of you combined, and yet you still test my patience, by testing me and my patience, hoping I would die so you could take my members from me. I said, standing only a few feet from them now. Well, let me tell you this, either of them could have taken all of you down with as much ease as I did. But they wouldn't have held back, because they don't care if you lived or not, and to tell you the truth I'm starting to feel the same. The only reason you are still alive now is because I didn't want to take your role as the leader of the vampire race all those years ago, but to tell you the truth I'm starting to think differently. I could kill all of you then lead the vampire race for a few hundred years before I pick someone to take my place, then I go on my merry way. The look of shock on their faces was hilarious and almost made me laugh at the sight, but at the moment I needed to keep the cold expression on my face, to really drive home the fear I was putting into them. But I'm not quite at the point where I want to spend hundreds of years doing that, I said. A look of relief shone on their faces, but not for long. But that doesn't mean you aren't going to pay for what you did, I said, and let an evil smile appear on my face. Wah, Marcus tried to say, before I grabbed him by his neck, before he could react or even see my move. Grabbing his neck, I kicked one of his knees as hard as possible, breaking the leg backwards and in half at the knee, causing him to let out a scream of pain, and to drop down on his one remaining knee, putting him at the perfect height for me to twist his head around, and off his shoulders. Now holding the head by the hair, I raised it to face Keys and Arrow, who were both wide-eyed in shock. Just then Alec, who I had forgotten, lunged at me hoping to distract me long enough to let the other two Volturi heads time to escape. Because as soon as he lunged, Keys and Arrow took off for the door. As soon as Alec was in range, I twisted my body around and kicked Alec in the side, launching him hard into one of the pillars that stood behind the Volturi's thrones. As soon as Alec was kicked, I ran full speed past the Volturi heads to the large metal doors, and stopped in their way. Both Arrow and Keys came to skidding halts in front of me, and with the evil smile still on my face, I used Arrow's own words. And who said you could leave? Both Keys and Arrow were now wide-eyed in fear, which only made my smile widen even more. And in a flash, I punched Arrow in the chest, launching him backwards, then I twisted around and grabbed Keys by his bright gold locks. You were the most annoying, I said to him as I pulled his head back, and grabbed his chin, then pulled his hair as hard as I could, causing Keys to open his mouth in a cry of pain. Taking the opening, I let go of his hair and chin and shoved my hands into his mouth, grabbing the top row with one hand and the bottom with the other. I then pulled in separate directions with a burst of strength, ripped the top of his head off above his mouth. You killed them, I heard Arrow yell from where he had fallen. Turning to look at him, I let out a chuckle. No, I didn't, they are just fine, you can put them back together when I'm done with you, I said, slowly walking to his prone position. How could I do that if you rip my head off? Arrow snarled at me. Simple, I don't rip your head off, I said with a chuckle. A look of confusion crossed Arrow's face before I made my move. Grabbing one of his legs, I brought it up, then pulled it in the opposite direction than it was supposed to bend and broke it off. A scream filled the room as I pulled his leg off. I told you, Arrow, I told you not to test me, and what did you do? I asked the still screaming Arrow, but didn't get a response. That's right, you tested me, and this is the price for doing so, I said, grabbing the other leg and doing the same thing. This time he let out a higher-pitched scream. Painful, isn't it? I asked him, but again didn't get a response to the question. Yeah, I made it quick for the other two, but I wanted to make sure you really got the point this time. Stepping to his side, I crouched down to get close to his face. Now, when we go with you to take care of the Romanians, I better not even see any of you looking in my direction, or I won't hesitate to kill all of you, and I mean kill. Understood? I asked. Arrow nodded his head quickly. Good, I said with a smile, then looking down I saw Arrow's arm. Oh wait, I forgot one, I said with a small laugh, then broke Arrow's arm off. Through his screams I told him, you only need one, and with a chuckle I tossed the arm over my shoulder. And with a, see you around, I walked out of the room, where all that could be heard was Arrow's cries of pain. As I neared the exit of the Volturi's base, I came across the female vampire that had led us through the base earlier, except it seems she tried to stop Julius and Jane, because at the moment she was embedded into the stone wall, with a sword sticking out of her brain. Talk about the wrong people to try and stop. One who can mentally burn you alive and the other can literally destroy you with a wave of his hands, I said aloud to myself as I walked past the new artwork Julius and Jane had left for the Volturi. Opening the large door to the outside world, I saw it was almost dusk. Taking a step out, I stepped on another body. I instantly knew who it was. It was the decapitated body of the guard that had stood by the door earlier. Ouch, I hope they put you back together. You seemed like a cool dude, I said with a chuckle as I stepped over him, and down the steps into the small city. One more chapter then the battle begins. Word 1520. If there are any problems with the chapter please let me know. My bad. The MC's power isn't going to be the regular aura manipulation. If I gave him full aura abilities he would be way too OP so his powers won't be too insane. 1. There isn't going to be different colored aura abilities he can use, just the one type of energy. 2. He will run out of aura energy. The way I imagine it is when he was bitten and the venom got into his body the power aspect of the vampire venom wasn't able to be taken out of the MC's blood, and it genetically changed the MC's cells to be able to consume aura energy through his skin, where it is then stored in the MC's cells until they are full, but when he uses the energy he will need to wait for it to refill. He will have a lot of energy but if he does constant shock waves he will run out of aura energy. 3. He won't be able to fly or boost his own strength or speed, he is already insanely fast and strong, if I give him the ability to boost all of that he will be too OP. Running at full speed through the town, I couldn't stop the smile that spread across my face. Never before had I felt more alive than at the moment, not at the fact that I just beat the ever-living shit out of the Volturi heads, but it was just a feeling that ran through me like that feeling you get as a kid when it's a few days from a holiday or your birthday, like I was overflowing with a weird type of energy. As I ran, I opened my interface and played some feel-good tunes. Scrolling through my own playlist I settled on Blame from a band called B.B. Cooper. At this point I was reaching the end of the town, so with a smile on my face and good music blasting in my head, I ran full out, the feeling of air rushing past my ears and through my hair felt magical. As I ran, I noticed the purple glow had appeared again, causing me to come to a complete stop as I looked down at myself. I'm glowing, I thought as I looked down at a light purple hue that seemed to radiate from me. It's the same glow as when I was in the Volturi's throne room. I thought as I watched the purple hue. Remembering the shockwaves I produced, I stuck one of my hands out, and mentally willed the energy out of my palm. And promptly got launched off my feet as a massive wave of purple left my hand. It launched me 20 feet backwards and straight into a tree. The crack, boom, of me hitting the tree could probably be heard from miles away. The impact broke a few parts of my spine, along with some of my ribs, as the tree morphed and broke, at my impact. Slowly sitting up I let out a groan, while I felt the pops and cracks, all over my body as the broken bones healed themselves back together. Finally after a minute to reorient myself, I looked at the carnage the shock wave produced. In front of me, what was once thick forest, was now what looked to me like a war zone. With trees uprooted and fallen for 100 feet in front of me and 15 feet wide, I couldn't help but look at it all stunned. My bad, I said in astonishment. Then bringing my hands up to my face, I looked at the same hands I have seen millions of times before, but unlike before, now they seemed so much more deadlier. Standing back up to my feet, I decided not to try a shock wave again, and instead to try and control the energy. So like before I put out my right hand and willed the energy to slowly creep from my palm, and before my eyes, a small ball of purple slowly crept out. But unlike the orb Julius' fist made to make his mind shield, this orb looked unstable and like choppy rippling water. Not wanting it to get too unstable and blow me up, I willed the orb tighter, and on mental command, the orb shrunk down and into what looked like a purple see-through bowling ball. Wow, I said, in excitement. Thinking of what I should do now, I pondered on this orb's utility. Then remembering something I read in a book, I thought, maybe I can make it into a weapon. I had my sword but I didn't fully trust it. It was a metal, and all it would take is one nick of the ball and me not noticing and swing and hit a vampire for it to break. Which kinda hurt to think about. I learned blacksmithing for years to make one blade and now to think of it as a faulty object hurts. So concentrating, I imagined a short sword. Slowly the orb morphed and straightened itself out, into something that resembled a short sword. That is if short swords were a see-through glowing purple. Moving my hand forward I grabbed the handle of the sword and weighed it in my hand. I can't even feel the weight. I thought as I swung the sword. Looking around, I saw a felled tree, so moving over to the remaining stump, I swung the sword into it. Thunk. What the hell? I said out loud to myself. The aura sword didn't do anything to the stump but scratch a piece of bark. Looking at the blade, I saw that the edge was rounded instead of sharp like a normal sword. Oh, I just thought of a sword, not a sharp sword. Concentrating, I willed the edge to be sharp instead of rounded. And slowly I watched as the edge tapered to a sharp edge. With a smile of success on my face, I tried again. Crack, bunk. This time the sword managed to cut into the wood about an inch. I thought it would be better, I said as I looked at the aura sword. As I was looking at the sword, it started to flicker and waver. But before I could will it to be stable again, the sword evaporated from my grip. What the hell? I thought as I watched it deteriorate. Confused at what just happened, I tried to will back the sword but couldn't. Closing my eyes, and concentrating on the image of a short sword again, I tried one more time. But again got nothing. Breathing hard, I wondered, maybe I can only use so much at once. Looking over at the forest I accidentally destroyed, I mumbled, probably used up all the energy on that blast. But needing to get back to Julius and Jane, I moved in the direction I told them to meet me at. Running through the woods again, my brain was running rampant with different ideas of how I could use my new ability. After a few more minutes of running, I came to the old abandoned campsite we used for our regrouping area. Looking around, I couldn't see any signs of Jane or Julius. Just when I was about to start looking, I heard a creak from above me. Looking up, I saw Jane and Julius sitting on a tree branch a few dozen feet above me, in the thick tree limbs of a tree. Oh, looky there, if it isn't two lovebirds sitting in a tree, I said jokingly to them. The face Jane made it clear that if she had blood, it would have been a blush. Hey old man, don't be petty, that we can actually find love, while you stick to one-night stands with a different woman every time. Julius shot back. You know, to some that could be considered quite the accomplishment and not the slur of character you intend it to be, I said back with a chuckle. Stepping out of the way, I watched as Jane and Julius dropped down from the tree branches, and back down to earth. Standing up from his crouch, Julius was the first to speak. So what happened? Why did you go back? Like I said, I needed to remind Arrow of something I told him about many years ago. And that would be, Julius pressed, that if you mess with me, I'll really make you regret it. And what of my brother? Jane asked, as she stepped to the side of Julius. I let out a small sigh, and looked her in the eyes. Jane, I'm sorry, but your brother is gone. I watched for any emotion on her face or any sign she might attack me out of anger. But nothing, she did nothing, didn't make a move, or was there a single twitch of her face to show her emotions, just a blank mask. So I continued. When she gets in your head, and she changes you, it can't be fixed. Even if I killed her, he would stay the same, and if I somehow got her to fix him, the damage done to his brain, well, it wouldn't be pretty. All the while Jane stayed silent, and listened to my words. But once I was done speaking, Jane finally did. In the Volturi's throne room, you said he was already dead, is that true? I nodded my head. Yes, did you see his eyes? I asked Jane. She nodded her head. So you saw how they were glassed over, lifeless. Again she nodded. Those aren't the eyes of the living, they are the eyes of the dead, no emotion, no feelings, just nothing. We fell silent at my words. Can you promise me something? Jane asked softly. Of course, I said. After this fight with the Romanian coven, kill him. Your brother? I asked. Yes, kill him, because I know he would rather be dead than be some puppet for those people, she said with anger in her voice. I nodded my head. I can do that. Even as my brain ran through the problem of me killing Alec would bring me with the Volturi. But I had a feeling after what I did to them today, they wouldn't have much of a problem. Kinda had to rush this one, so please let me know if there are any issues. And heads up, the next chapter will be coming tomorrow. The first half will have the MC exploring his powers a bit more, and the second half will start the journey to war. So the chapter after the fight will begin, and we can finally move on with the story. And by the way, thank you all for the support you have given me. If it wasn't for all of you, I would have stopped writing a long time ago, because it has been a real challenge to write this with my busy life, so from the bottom of my heart I thank you. Bean. Word 1900. And so it begins. After starting a fire, and putting a slice of meat from one of the deers Julius and Jane drank from, on a stick to cook over the fire, we sat in silence, listening to the crack and pop of the small fire. After a few good minutes of cooking in the flames, I pulled out the kebab and started to blow cool air onto it so I couldn't hurt myself. Wouldn't you just heal if you burned your mouth? Jane asked. Of course I would, but that doesn't mean I want to burn my mouth. I might heal from it, but I can still feel the pain, I said, letting the deer kebab cool off. She slowly nodded her head. Taking a bite from the still smoking piece of deer meat, I looked up at the night sky through the trees above. As I was watching the beautiful night sky, Julius asked, did you find anything out about your power? I shrugged my shoulders. Sort of. What did you find out? Julius asked. While taking a bite of the deer meat, I raised my left hand, and slowly let the aura energy leave my hand, to morph itself into a small ball. That's it? Julius asked. What happened to the whole massive waves you were making back in the throne room? He asked. I stared at him, and raised an eyebrow, then released the energy I was keeping in a ball. The orb exploded into a large wave of purple force, right into a tree a couple of feet away from us. The force from the small billiard-sized ball of aura energy was enough to blow part of the tree facing us off, while also causing it to break in half and fall over away from us. I raised my other brow and asked. You were saying? Both Julius and Jane stared open-mouthed at the carnage the small aura ball could cause. Is that all? Jane asked excitedly. Nope, I said with a smile. Raising my hand again, I imagined the short sword again. As the sword morphed itself into shape, Jane and Julius watched in amazement as the energy slowly took the shape of a sword. The problem is, it's not that sharp, I said in a moody tone. I can only make it so sharp. I continued before we fell silent again. After a few moments of silence, Julius spoke. Your sword is sharp, right? The real one. You always refuse to use it because of how sharp it is, and you are afraid that if you use it, it could break. Julius asked. Yeah, it's insanely sharp, but I'm always afraid to use it because of how old it is, and all it would take is one small nick to break the blade in battle. I said. What if you did what I do with my mind shields, but a little different, put it so close to the blade and edge that it takes on the edge's sharpness itself, so instead of the blade cutting, it will be that energy you can use. Julius said. Now my eyes went wide. I'm such an imbecile, I thought, while mentally shaking my forehead. Going to my pack, we had stashed here, I opened a rolled woven blanket, and pulled out my sword. For it being nearly 2,000 years old, it's still in pristine condition from the constant care I give the blade. Maybe that's why I am so reluctant to use it. When you spend years learning something just to make one item, then you make it, then you practically fall in love with it. Kinda like cars, you buy a nice fancy car for yourself, to drive, but it ends up as your most prized possession and it just ends up sitting in the garage as something to look at. We all have that one family member with an old car in the garage that they never drive but love to stare at. Now with the blade I return to the fire and sit down. Right here goes nothing, I say, before I slowly release the energy, imagining the aura surrounding the blade. As the purple energy slowly crept from my hand and onto the blade, I watched as it morphed to the blade, slowly taking on its shape perfectly. But it didn't feel right, so slowly I pushed the energy tighter around the blade until the purple hue of the energy started to creep into the blade itself, until finally I couldn't push out any more energy into the blade. Looking at the now glowing blade in my hands, I couldn't help the childish laugh that escaped my lips. Standing to my feet, I walked to one of the nearby trees, maybe 5 feet in diameter, and quite tall. Now with the perfect testing object in front of me, I swung the blade, and with an almost silent ching, the blade cut through the thick tree like a hot knife through butter, causing the once large and alive tree to fall over with a crash. I stared down at the slightly glowing blade and thought, I'm a Jedi. Incredible. Julius shouted. I know, I said back excitedly. With that, you could be unstoppable. Julius said. But just then the glow that was emanating from the blade slowly started to dim. Oh right, I said as I watched the light leave the blade. Must not have given it enough time to recharge, I thought. What happened? Julius asked, as he approached me. I think I can only hold so much energy at once, I said, turning the sword in my hands. I used up quite a lot on the way over here, so I probably haven't recharged yet. That might be a problem. Do you think it's like my power where you just need to practice with it to build up your power with it? Julius asked. I don't know, possibly, I said. Well, I guess I can practice while we wait for the Volturi to be ready, I said, walking back to my pack to put the sword back with my pack. For the next week I continuously practiced with my ability, and let me tell you, wow, my ability has massive destruction capabilities when I use it for shock waves, or as I found out, Small shock bullets, where I create a small aura energy ball the size of a gum ball, and launch it at something. As soon as it hits its target, it will explode with a force akin to a stick of dynamite. Or I can push all the energy out at once and cause one massive wave. What we also found out was how much energy I can use. I can do 7 full-sized and consecutive shock waves straight, before needing to wait 15 minutes to recharge. With my sword I learned that I didn't need to completely cover the blade in my aura energy, but instead just keep the energy on the sharp edges of the blade, which made the energy usage practically unnoticeable. On the 8th day of our training, I heard the fast approaching sound of footfalls. Stopping my aura blade training, I turned in the direction of the footsteps and prepared myself for a possibly hostile enemy approaching. I wasn't the only one to notice either. Both Jane and Julius stopped the practice fight they were currently in to also turn towards the oncoming noise. After another moment, a middle-aged man with dark brown hair and crimson eyes ran out of the woods and into the clearing of tree stumps I had made while practicing with my aura sword. The sight of the clearing full of fallen trees and trunks made the vampire come to a complete halt, as his eyes roamed the small sea of fallen trees. The vampire was about 100 yards from where we stood. As he did so, I saw that the vampire was wearing the red and black cloak of the Volturi. So wanting to know if he brought news from the Volturi, I raised a hand then called out to him. Can we help you? As soon as I spoke, the vampire's head shot in my direction, but the sight of me with no shirt on made him pause again, and I don't blame him. Julius likes to use the word, barbarian, to describe the look I tend to take on. Let me explain, I have a bad habit of forgetting to cut my hair, and well it can get pretty long before it starts to become an annoyance to be where I then cut it. At the moment my hair hung halfway down my back, while on the temple area I had braided the hair in long braids that fell down onto my chest. And since I had been training, I took off my tunic so I wouldn't get too hot. So at the moment the vampire was looking at a large 6'3" man with the best physique he had ever seen holding a glowing sword, yeah. But after a moment to reset his mind, the vampire zoomed to stand in front of us. How did you find us? I asked the vampire as soon as he stopped in front of me. I can track, that's my ability. The vampire stammered out. What do you want? I asked him. I was sent by the Volturi to let you know we will be leaving tomorrow at dusk. He said. I nodded my head and a smile spread across my face. And so it begins. Word 1608. The battle. 15 days later. Well, this sucks, I thought as I walked with my pack through a muddy field. Since the start of the trip it's been nothing but rain and mud the whole way. Thankfully today it was just cloudy instead of pouring rain, making the whole trip one miserable mess for me. At the moment, me, Julius and Jane were about half a mile in front of the Volturi forces, because I thought it better to just keep them away from them. The smell of blood from the blood feasts the Volturi have every few days was intense, and even a mile away put Jane and Julius to a test of their willpower. We had already had a run-in with a group of vampires when we first passed by a town almost a week ago. Instead of fighting or trying to hide they decided to retreat and probably give word to the Romanian heads. Speaking of the Volturi army, I was a bit miffed at it. In total the Volturi only had 500 fighters. The 3 ruling heads, their guards, which were 10 of their strongest fighters, and the rest were vampires with slightly stronger abilities. Which for a vampire army is very respectable, but from what I know of the Romanian coven, is that they weren't on top because of their good looks, it's because of their sheer numbers. The Romanian coven probably has at most 1,000 vampires on their side. And even though we might have some stronger than normal vampires on our side, that won't matter when that stronger vampire is fighting 3 vampires at once. As we were walking, I saw a small group of vampires blurring in our direction as they came over a rise of a small hill. From the red and black colors in their blur, I could tell it was the scouts that the Volturi had sent out to look for the Romanian forces in front of the Volturi army. Watching them pass by us I looked at Jane and Julius and said. I guess they found the Romanian coven. I said looking back at the small hill the scouts had come from, a small smile appeared on my face. Let's go see what we can see. I told Jane and Julius, before blurring to the top of the hill to look around. As soon as I came to a stop I looked, and instantly saw what the scouts had seen. In the distance, maybe 5 miles away, was a mass of figures moving in our direction. Is that them? Julius asked me. I think so, the sun isn't out, so I can't tell. I said looking at the moving mass. It has to be, who else would be out here with an army? Jane said to my left. Shrugging my shoulders I said. Let's wait here for the Volturi to arrive. Since the start of the journey, the Volturi heads have been trying to avoid me. To be fair, I can't blame them, it's not every day someone rips you apart. As we waited for the Volturi's army to arrive at the hill, me, Jane and Julius continued to watch the approaching army. From the look of it, there were no less than 2,000 in the group, and if it was the Romanian coven, then we might have an issue. Because that's an almost 4-to-1 advantage the Romanian coven will have on us. About 10 minutes later, the front line of the Volturi's vampires finally reached the hill we were sitting at while we watched the armies approach. As we sat, I could hear the whispered conversations of some of the vampires. It's them, I overheard the scouts telling Arrow of their numbers. There is no way we can win, one of them said. So it is the Romanian coven, I thought. Look at that, if that is the Romanian coven's army, we might as well turn back and run. Another said. And I agreed, if this was the Romanian army we might be screwed. But there was still a chance. With Alec, Julius, Jane, and myself, we could do large amounts of damage to the army on our own. Just as long as we don't get bogged down in vampires trying to kill us, I should be fine on my own, with my speed, strength, and inability to die. Julius should also be fine, since if anyone gets too close he can wave his hand and launch them into orbit. What really worried me was Jane. Jane was technically the weakest member of our trio. Her ability may be strong and she can use her powers on more than one person at once, but it does have its limits. I looked it up, she is limited in range and number of people she can use her powers on at once. Her limit is 20 vampires that she could immobilize at once, giving others time to kill them, while Jane's power keeps them from fighting back. Her weak link is that she tends to rely on her powers more than her physical fighting skills, which might be problematic. Turning to look at Julius and Jane, I spoke. When we fight, Jane, you need to stay close to Julius. That is what I was thinking. Julius said. I saw a small frown appear on Jane's face, so before she could protest my decision, I spoke. Jane, you're a good fighter, but you aren't the best, and in this fight we are going to be massively outnumbered, 4-to-1, and me and Julius can't try and protect you while we also fight the Romanian coven, but if you stick with Julius, he should be able to protect you without much trouble. I said, looking her in the eyes. Jane nodded her head. I understand, and besides, me and Julius have come up with some good attacks, we should be able to hold our own. I nodded my head at her words. Good. Just then I heard the noise behind us starting to get louder. Turning my head, I could see the Volturi heads making their way through the crowds of vampires, until they were standing in front of the army, and a few feet from me. Looking over at them, I couldn't stop a smirk from appearing on my face. They still refused to even acknowledge my existence. My brother and sisters, Arrow said in a raised voice to quiet the mass of Volturi vampires. Today is the day we take what is ours, what has always been ours. He shouted. But Arrow didn't get the sounds of affirmation he was expecting. Because unlike when they took down the Egyptian coven, which only has 200 members, now they were going up against a true threat of power. And this just showed Arrow's delusional mind. For him to believe that his members would be willing to dive headfirst into what he thought was an all but certain victory, but in reality was a death sentence. Which made me wonder how they managed to win the first time. Did I change the world to the point the Romanian coven accidentally ended up with more vampires than in the original world, or did the Volturi have less members than they were originally supposed to have? Or was this how it played out in the real Twilight world, and the Volturi actually won with this low of numbers, which was hard to believe, but stranger things have happened. Unaware of the lack of reaction, Arrow spoke again. And we will take the role of the ruling coven, of the world. He shouted. This time as I watched the Volturi's army of vampires, I saw a glassy look come over their eyes for a split second, before a cheer rose from the crowd in an approving shout for Arrow's words. It's Chelsea, she's here. I thought as I watched their faces. I wasn't sure if she had come with the army or not. Because the wives weren't here, and if I remembered correctly, she was normally with the wives. I was glad I made Julius keep the mind shields in place throughout the trip just in case. I wasn't sure if the Volturi might have a mind reader in the group or another psychic that can do things to our minds, so I decided it would be better to be safe than sorry, and from the look of it, it was a good decision. By now the Romanian coven army was close enough to see them clearly. And I was a bit shocked at what I saw. Mixed into the group were what looked like kids and young adults, no older than 10 years old, as well as people that looked like regular villagers. That's it, most of these people look like newborns. When that group saw us pass by that town, They probably told the Romanian coven heads, and probably in a panic they started making a newborn army. I thought in shock. They even turned the kids. I thought, with a spike of anger that shot through me. As Arrow continued his speech, I turned to Jane and Julius. The both of you need to be extra careful, this isn't going to be easy. From the look of it, most of those vampires down there are newborn, so they will be a lot stronger than you, and faster. They won't know how to fight, so that will be to your advantage if you have to fight them hand to hand, but try to avoid it. I said to them, turning to Julius, I continued. And Julius, make sure not to lose control of your mind shields. I'm certain, Chelsea is here, and all it will take is a moment for her to enter your mind, so don't overdo yourself, if you need to fall back, and recharge yourself. Julius nodded at my words. By now, only a mile separated the two armies from each other. Running back to behind the army, we dropped off our packs, and prepared ourselves for the battle. Pulling out the sword from my pack, I looked it over for any signs of damage or marks. While Julius and Jane took off the cloaks they were wearing to give them better movement. Once done getting ready, we went back to the front of the army, where Arrow was just finishing his speech. Now, don't be afraid of this battle, for we shall win with our overwhelming strength, and stand victorious over our fallen foes. And with a shout, Arrow raised a hand into the air, while his army of brainwashed vampires cheered him on. Turning to look at Jane and Julius, I gave them a nod. Remember, stick together, and watch each other's backs. We will at 'em, Julius said, as he gave my shoulder a pat. Turning away from them, I opened my interface and scrolled through my music list until I found the folder I had prepared just for this moment, War Music. Clicking on the folder, the first song to play was one from Doom. Rip and Tear. Just then, I heard a shout from the Romanian army. Turning to look, I saw a massive group of blurring figures heading right for us. And an evil smile covered my face as the head-banging music filled my head. Dot. 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 Word count. 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 Dot. 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 JK, I'm gonna do the whole fight in one chapter, so I hope you enjoy it. Dot. Dot. As soon as the Romanian coven started to charge, so did the Volturi. Running full speed to the front of the Volturi's forces, I raised my hand, and pushed out a medium-sized energy orb. 10 feet from the Romanian coven I let it loose. The shockwave hit the front line with force, sending all that was in front of me, 5 feet across and 10 feet back. 50 vampires were shot backwards, with broken and separated limbs, from the force of running full speed into my shockwave. The opening I made allowed me to run straight into the heart of their forces. With my blade flashing a bright purple, I twirled through the vampires, cutting off heads and limbs with every swing. Occasionally letting off a shockwave or two to allow me some room, and not to be completely surrounded. As I was fighting, I saw out of the corner of my eye, Jane and Julius. At the moment, Julius had a handful of vampires in the air, floating around him and Jane. He was using the floating bodies as weapons to hit the vampires that were downed by Jane's mental fire power, using the bodies like hammers to crash down into the heads of the downed vampires. Having to take my eyes away from them to avoid the hand of a vampire that got too close. I delved back into the fight once again. At the moment the fight wasn't going in the Volturi's favor. Even with me, Jane, Julius and Alex powers, we were still losing too many of our own forces to the power of the newborns, while the Volturi heads stayed on the hill looking down at the fight, with a few of their personal guards still standing guard by them, while the rest fought with Alec. Needing to give the Volturi's forces the upper hand, I turned in Julius's direction and shouted. I'm going all out. That was the wording we set up for when I push out all of my energy at once to make the big shockwaves. But I needed to go farther into the Romanians' army, and away from the Volturi's forces. So with a plan in mind, I zoomed through the army, cutting down any that got in my way. I had to cut down a few kids on the way, but at the moment I didn't have time to think about the fact that I just cut a little kid's head off of his shoulders, and I just focused on the plan I had in my mind. Finally, on the other side of the army from the front line, and deep inside the Romanian army by myself. Now surrounded on all sides by newborn vampires that could smell my blood, I was hard-pressed to deflect and avoid all the oncoming attacks. Making a small opening for myself, I used the second of time I had made myself, to crouch down, and push the energy from my body all at once. Third POV. Like the explosion of a modern-day bomb, a purple hue swept the battlefield. throwing all within a 30-foot radius from the explosion back and into each other with such forces, that it killed almost 100 vampires from the force of being knocked back and into other vampires. Within 50 to 60 feet, all vampires were knocked from their feet, to tumble on the ground. Farther from that, all the force did, was push them forward, and the stumble, giving a few of the Volturi vampires the upper hand, to attack their now stumbling opponents. First POV. Standing from my crouched position, I looked around myself at the carnage my aura shockwave caused, and once again was amazed at the destruction my powers caused. As I looked around, I saw Julius taking the opportunity to attack the downed vampires, by using his power to levitate groups of downed vampires, then slamming them together mid-air, until they were beating themselves to pieces with each other's bodies. While Jane used her powers to make the rising vampires to fall back to the ground in pain with her power. Seeing a black mist making its way through a large group of vampires, I looked over to see Alex Mist taking away vampires' senses while the Volturi guards that were with him, tore the heads off the senseless vampires. Hearing fast approaching feet from behind me, I twirled around, and dodged the hand that tried to claw at me with the long nails of the hand. As I dodged I got a good look at who it was that attacked and smiled an evil smile at who it was. Because it was none other than Vladimir. With his almost white blonde hair and crimson eyes. Well, looky here, if it isn't one of the Romanian coven heads. I said, pointing my sword at him. I've heard of you, the human god. He spat. You are no god, if you were then you could have saved those innocent villagers you tried to save. I ground my teeth together at his words. I never said I was a god, and I might not have been able to save that village, but I will avenge them and wash their blood from my hands, with the death of you and the rest of the Romanian coven. I said, before I charged Vladimir at full speed. The speed of my movements sent Vladimir's survival instincts haywire, and made Vladimir backpedal in an attempt to avoid my attack. But he was just too slow. Like a wraith of death, I came out of my blurred run swinging my sword vertically down, and into his head. With a crack, my sword split Vladimir down the middle and into two separate halls. The sight of his shocked face before I cut him in two would be something I would remember and enjoy for the rest of time. Turning back to the fight, I watched as the Volturi slowly gained the upper hand in the fight. But looking back at Alec's fight, I saw one of the other Romanian heads Stefan in a hand-to-hand fight with Alec, while the rest of the Volturi guards that were there to protect Alec, fought the Romanian head's own guards. The Romanians were clearly the better fighters. With the average Romanian guard being over 800 or 900 years old, and the Volturi guards on average being 600 to 700 years old. The Volturi guards didn't stand much of a chance. Just then the memory of Jane's words flashes through my mind. Kill him, because I know he would rather be dead than some puppet. If I let the Romanian coven kill him, I could avoid the problem of the Volturi being angry with me for killing their biggest asset, but how to make sure he stays dead. Reaching into a pouch I had at my waist, I pulled out a small round clay ball with a fabric fuse coming from the top, in all it was smaller than a baseball. On the inside was a flammable oil. It wasn't big enough to be compared to a Molotov cocktail, but enough to catch their clothes on fire. Waiting for the right moment, I pulled a flint from the same pouch, and watched the fight, while making sure no vampires were coming from behind me. Not seeing anything I looked back, and continued to watch. For being a fraction of the age of Stefan, Alec was putting up one hell of a fight. But just like Jane, Alec clearly practiced with his powers more than he ever did with hand-to-hand, because every time Alec tried to make distance to use his powers, Stefan was right behind him constantly attacking, and not letting Alec use his powers. Back and forth the fight continued until finally Alec made a mistake, and paid the price. Taking the opening Alec didn't cover, Stefan got a hold of his arm and twisted it until it broke. As soon as I saw that Stefan had taken the upper hand of the fight, I hit the flint together close to the fabric fuse, until it finally caught. Looking up, I watched as Alec's head was ripped from his head. Standing up, I pulled my arm back, and with as much straight as I could put into it, I threw the small clay container at Alec's now headless body. I watched as my mini Molotov flew through the air, to hit Alec's still falling body in the chest. As soon as the clay burst open, the oil hit the fiery fuse, and a ball of fire burst out over Alec's body. There, I said as I watched the body burn. Turning my gaze to Stefan who was backing away from the now burning body of Alec with a confused look. Now it's your turn, I said to myself, as I blurred full speed in his direction. He didn't even see as I blurred to his side, and sliced his head off right above the mouth. And before his body could fall to the ground, I pushed his body into the burning body of Alec, to hopefully add fuel to the fire. Now with the Romanian coven leaders dead and Alec gone, now all I needed to focus on was the last remaining vampires. Looking around, I watched the fighting. Jane and Julius were working in perfect cohesion, as Jane made the vampires in front of her fall in pain, while Julius picked them up and tore them apart. So deciding they didn't need my help, I turned to help the Volturi's guards who were still fighting the Romanian guards. In a blur, I ran in between each of the guards, killing or maiming the Romanian vampires. Once the Volturi guards had the upper hand, I turned on the remaining Romanian vampires, which were only a few hundred. At the moment they still outnumbered us, especially since we had lost almost half of our forces, but those who remained were the strongest the Volturi had. So in a blur I ran at the still fighting vampires, and started shooting off aura bullets at the backs of the Romanian vampires, taking out 2 or 3 vampires out with each shot. Then as I ran out of energy, so I entered the melee and started causing havoc. Cutting AMD slices off any limbs in my way, not noticing if they were women, man, or vampiric child, I swung with abandon, as I lost myself in the fight, and the heavy metal music that still filled my head. After what felt like only minutes, I ran out of bodies to cut. Finally breaking from my trance, I looked around, at the hundreds of bodies that littered the ground. Holy shit, we did it. I thought to myself as I looked out at the battlefield. Opening my interface, I turned the volume of the music down, and looked around for Julius and Jane. I saw them killing off the last of the vampires, who were still alive on their half of the battlefield. As I watched Julius break one of them in half, I couldn't help but let a smile dawn my face. We did it, and all in one piece. I thought as I saw them, but then I looked around to count our own numbers. And I was a little surprised, because all that remained was 20 of us in total. With me, Jane and Julius, the 3 Volturi heads, the 7 remaining guards, and 8 surviving regular vampires. Shit, I said out loud as I saw how close the battle was for the Volturi. But we did it, we won, and now I can move on with my immortal life, and put this part of my life behind me. Well, there we go, the first arc of the story is over, and now I can start doing some cool shit with the MC, because we are starting to come to the part of history the MC knows, and will be able to actually be a part of history. And by the way, I'm super tired, so I can't make any promises that I caught all of the mistakes in my check reads. So if there was anything wrong, please let me know. Bean. Word 4002. Now what? Making my way through the battlefield, I slowly made my way to where Jane and Julius were looking over the battlefield, in amazement of our achievement just like I had done. Stepping over the corpses, I made sure not to accidentally step on the bodies of the newly deceased. Finally reaching them, I stopped and looked out at the field of bodies. I have seen many wars and battles fought, but this was my first time taking part in one. I said. I don't think it's for me. Julius said, in almost a whisper. Did you see the kids? Jane asked us. I turned to look at her. I think so, maybe a couple. I didn't think about it, I just kept swinging my sword at anything in front of me. I wish I could say the same, but I had to think and see to use my powers. Julius said. When I had to tear them apart, or when I bashed them together, I had to watch. He said. Turning to him, I spoke. Well, they weren't really there anymore, so don't feel bad. I said to him. What do you mean, they weren't really there? Jane asked. Children who have been turned, are more impulsive and less capable of self-control compared to adult vampires, and are even more vulnerable to their vampiric instincts. Their thirst for blood is all that drives them forward, like a person dying of thirst in the desert, all they can think about is the liquid that could sedate their thirst, which for them is blood. I said. We went quiet again, just sitting there looking out at the destruction we had caused, and thinking about the fight. Jane's head turned and looked out to our side. You did it. Jane said, as she saw the burning bodies of Stefan and Alec. I nodded my head. Yes, he's gone. She sat there dead still for a moment, watching the burning flames, before speaking again. Thank you, she said in a sad tone. I looked at her. There's no need to thank me, he didn't deserve what he got, but at least now he can be at peace. Jane slowly nodded her head, and we all went quiet again. After a few moments Julius spoke. What now? He asked, breaking the silence that surrounded us. A wicked smile spread across my face. Now, I'm going to go talk to the Volturi, then we are going to go see all those things I told you about. Both Jane's and Julius's heads shot in my direction. Really? Jane said excitedly, dispersing the shroud of sadness that once surrounded her. Really? Now while I'm gone, why don't the two of you decide where you want to go first? I said with a chuckle, as I turned to start heading up the hill I had last seen the Volturi standing on. Stepping over bodies and body parts, I finally made it to the top of the hill, where I saw the last few remaining vampires milling about around a large tent that was recently put up, while in the distance, I could see the last surviving human blood bags, being guarded by just one vampire. Reaching the tent, I swung open the tent flap and stepped inside. The inside of the tent was dark, with very little amounts of light creeping through the fabric tent. Inside sat the three Volturi heads, all sitting around a circle wooden table, and in ornate chairs. Behind them stood two of their personal guards, who gave me death stares as I stepped in. I instantly saw the tightening around Eros' eyes, and the tension in Marcus and Key's bodies, at my appearance. They are still tensed up after my little reminder I gave them. I thought with a chuckle. I honestly can't blame them. One minute they were kings, the next I was tearing them apart, breaking the illusion they had of them being invincible. Ero was the first to speak. Ah, if it isn't the savior of the battle. He said, with a hint of a sneer hidden under his complimenting words. Yes, it's me, and you're welcome. I said with a chuckle at his words. I'm just stopping by to tell you this is where we separate, and I and my coven members go our own way. I said. And also where I bring you another warning. I added. Ero raised an eyebrow. And that would be? He asked. I stepped forward until I was standing right in front of the round table they were seated at, and looked Ero dead in the eyes. I will stay out of your way. As long as you stay out of mine, you can do as you wish with the vampiric world as long as you stay away from my coven and myself, and if you decide that it is a good idea to come for me and my coven, I won't give you a warning, and I won't hold back like I did to you, I will come for you and I will kill all of you. I said in almost a whisper. I saw a flash of fear and anger run through Eros' eyes, before he slowly nodded his head. I saw that Keys wanted to open his mouth and say something, but my eyes flashed in his direction and I stared him in the eyes, giving him a warning with my cold glare. When they didn't say anything, I turned on my heels and started for the exit, not giving them time to say anything that might piss me off. Stepping out of the tent, I let my eyes adjust to the light before going to grab our packs, then head back to Jane and Julius. Now laden down with all our packs, I slowly made my way back to Jane and Julius, who were now sitting on the hilltop and still looking over the battlefield. Have you figured out where the both of you would like to go first? I asked them, as I reached where they were seated. Julius turned his head and looked at me. Yes, we have, he said, in a happy tone. Dropping their packs on the damp ground, I asked. And where would that be? With a smile on his face, he said. To the east, to the other ocean, Julius said. Really? I said in surprise. Yes, I always wanted to go, Julius said. Those stories you told us sounded very interesting, and we would love to see the culture there. Jane added. I nodded my head. Sure, we can take the Silk Road straight there. I said as I thought of the best path to take. Looking back at the battlefield, Julius asked. What is going to happen to all the bodies? I thought for a moment before saying. More than likely, they are just going to burn all of them. I said with a shrug. Jane looked up at me. Won't they try to put them back together? She asked. Possibly, but there are so many broken limbs and body parts down there, it would be almost impossible to find which part goes to who. The Volturi will more than likely just start over again, but maybe with fewer vampires, it's not like they really have any enemies left. Except you, Julius added. Except me, I chuckled. We have a bit of an understanding. They keep the vampires under control and I don't wipe out their race. I said with a huff. Jane looked up at me again. You would take out the vampire race? She asked. I let out a laugh. Maybe, if they get out of hand, sure. The only reason I haven't is because most vampires are just trying to survive, like the rest of us, and they aren't insane sycophantic a-holes like the Romanian coven was, who kill for fun, but instead kill to survive. She nodded her head at that. Now I don't know about the both of you, but I'm ready to get going, the less time we spend around the Volturi the better. I said, picking up my pack and putting it on my back. Jane and Julius soon followed my lead, and grabbed their own packs. Once we were set, and ready to go, I stopped and looked out at the field of dead bodies one last time. As I looked out at the field, the clouds for the first time in almost 2 weeks opened, and a ray of sunlight shone through and onto the battlefield, causing the broken limbs, and bodies of the dead vampires to sparkle brightly. It's strange, Julius said, from beside me. Looking over at him, I asked. What is? I gestured with his chin, at the now sparkling field. How something that only moments ago was a scene of death, destruction, and carnage, can now look so magical. Meant to post sooner, but the power went out because of the weather and I wasn't able to access my computer, so sorry about that. If there are any problems, please let me know. East. The trip to the east, and into Asia was a long journey. With our constant stops at anything we found interesting, or if we just felt like relaxing for a few days, it's not like we had anywhere to be at the moment. We decided to go by land instead of sea, so we could see the world around us instead of the constant blue of the sea. The experience was incredible for both Jane and Julius alike. Julius might be 600 years old, but all he has ever seen was Rome, Alexandria, and our home in England, but other than that, he was a clean slate, as well as Jane. On our travels east, we stopped at some of the most important places. First at Constantinople. Then we stopped and saw the massive walls of Babylon. Then continued east, going from city to city. Along the way, I picked up my old habit of trading. And before you knew it, we had a camel, who Jane named Joshua, who carried some silks and herbs. And a donkey, who was truly an ass. The thing would bite anyone who got close to it. We didn't even bother to name him. Jane and Julius had a bet going to see how long it would take before I killed him myself. Moving on. With my new fire burning inside me, we continued on our journey east. Town to town, or city to city, we went, without a care in the world, just enjoying our lives to the fullest. While we were on our travels, I came across a first for me in this world. A Bible. The Bible was written in Hebrew, so I had a little trouble reading it, Hebrew not being one of my main languages of speaking, so I had become rather rusty at it. But as I continued to read it, the more it came back to me, and the more I understood of the book. As I read, I came across the story of Adam and Eve. Reading the story, I wasn't surprised at what happened. From when they ate the apple from the tree of knowledge, to being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. As well as what God did when he kicked them out of Eden. But what differed from the original Bible, was the discrimination of Adam himself. In the original Bible, there wasn't much of a discrimination of either Adam or Eve. Instead, the story mostly focuses on the creation of human beings and their relationship with God. The appearance of Adam is not mentioned in detail in the biblical account. But in this Bible there was an actual detailed description of him. Tall, pale skin, and hair like snow. Oh fuck, I thought as I read the first few words of the description. You have got to be kidding me. I said to myself, as I sat beside a small fire, in the middle of a desert, in what will become Afghanistan. At the moment, both Jane and Julius were off hunting for any wildlife there might be in the desolate mountains, leaving me to sit and tend the fire. Which I didn't mind because it gave me time to read. But now, I am a little afraid. This can't be real, can it? Me, a part of what will be the biggest religion in the world, as the first human. Pushing down the wild thoughts that erupted at even the thought of that being true, I continued to read. The story continued after the banishment of Adam and Eve, like normal. Toil of work for Adam, and birth to hurt for Eve. But what really changed things was that the story continued to Adam and Eve's first two sons, Cain and Abel, and where Cain kills Abel in a fit of jealousy. But in this Bible, Adam witnessed Abel's death, and in a rage, Adam killed his other son Cain. When God witnessed this act of anger, he cursed Adam, to become a wanderer of earth, to never die. After that the story continued. It went on to tell the story of how after the death of even more of his children, Adam left to wander the world, to become known as the white-haired wanderer. Oh fuck, I thought, as my brain came to a sudden halt. Fuck, I'm the Adam. I mentally panicked. My brain was turning with different emotions and thoughts as I stood and started walking around the fire in circles as I sorted out my thoughts. What could the repercussions from this be? I thought. It can't be much, right? After another hour of my mind slowly taking itself apart, I finally managed to calm down. It's not that big of a deal, I'm sure people won't be on the hunt for me or something. After that night, I continued to read the Bible, and saw that all that changed was Adam being cursed to wander the world instead of his son Cain. Continuing east, we finally made it to China. At the moment China is going through a golden period of stability, economically, and lane trade, under the Tang dynasty. We stayed in China for a little over 7 months, where we traded and sold many of my goods, for Chinese silks and other items. While Julius and Jane experienced the culture. Once we decided to leave, we headed north, to see the Great Wall. Which for its time, or even in the future, is one hell of a work of engineering. For thousands of miles, they built a wall to protect them. Now that we were leaving, we took a bit of a roundabout way back east. First going north, we did some trading with the nomadic tribes, north of China, with some of the groups that would someday become Genghis Khan's army. Even though the Mongolians weren't at their peak yet, and were still separate nomadic tribes, they were still some very incredible hunters, horse riders, and bow users. Our first meeting with the first of the nomadic tribes was a little rocky, since I didn't know their language that well. But through hand gestures and pointing, they figured out I was here to trade. They were interested in Joshua, our camel. Never before had they seen one. When I tried showing them how to ride one, it turned into a true fiasco, where there wasn't a single person there that could contain their laughter. To get onto the camel, Joshua had to lay down, so we could pull ourselves into the makeshift saddle I had bought to ride Joshua during our travels. The funny part came, when the person that was seated on Joshua's back, would freak out and fall off, when Joshua stood up. The movement and height always caused whomever was trying to ride him to panic and either jump off, or fall off his back. Thankfully Joshua was like a big puppy, and had fun watching people fall off of him. After we were done trading with that tribe of nomads, they brought us to another nomadic tribe where we once again traded goods, and where the tribe's men would try and ride Joshua, but nobody could manage it. For another few months we continued going from tribe to tribe selling and trading. On one of my trades I managed to get my hands on one of their bows. At the moment the bow wasn't like what it will become, which was a short bow that has incredible power, but you could certainly see that it was on its way to become the incredible weapon it will become. I actually found shooting the bow to be quite fun. Of course I had to be careful when using it, because with my strength, pulling the bow which only had a 100-pound pull weight was for me like pulling a bungee cord, and I could accidentally pull back too hard and break the bow in half. It was always a small rush when I hit a bullseye shot, at a good distance. Leaving the nomadic tribes we started going back west. Where we stopped in India. Just like in China, India was currently going through a period of prosperity, even though it was currently split into two kingdoms, Rashtrakuta dynasty, Pratihara dynasty, the whole region was still having a large growth in their economy, and other areas, like mathematics, and science. For almost a year we stayed in India. We didn't mean to, but there truly were some incredible cultural things to see there, where every day we could find something new to explore. There will be time skips, but they won't be big skips, maybe 100 years in some at most, but I'm not big on the whole time skip scene, so I'm not gonna do big ones, because the MC is going to actually start taking part in some historical events. If you have enjoyed my story, please let me know what you think, and thank you so much for the support, it does mean a lot to me, and thank you. Bean. Word 1543. I didn't do it. 916 AD. 4916 years in the world. To move the plot forward and get to a particular historical point, this chapter will contain a few quick time jumps. Now, perched on a wooden stool, I was painting the breathtaking scenery in front of me with a paintbrush. Right now, I was painting a gorgeous dawn over a mountain crest while sitting in a forest in the Italian Alps. I dipped my brush into my homemade paint and started painting the canvas. As I painted I couldn't help but let out a chuckle as I thought, Leonardo da Vinci who? After returning from our almost decade-long journey to wherever we felt like going, we returned to England. But the reason I am currently sitting atop a mountain is that during our return home, Jane and Julius had finally become a couple, and let's just say, living in the same house as them, wasn't the best choice at the moment. So deciding to give them time to get all of their pent-up love out of the way, I decided to start working on a new passion of mine. Painting. I got the idea after selling all of the items I had accumulated over our journeys that we didn't want to keep. Including our cart that the ass who shall not be named used to pull. The person I sold the cart to was a painter of great skill. This surprised me, because the dude could really paint. I didn't remember his name ever being known in the future, or ever seeing one of his works of art, which must mean he was one of the many lost to time, as just another painter to never be known. After seeing the masterpieces in his shop, I decided to give it a shot. With my better than normal noggin on my shoulders, I became quite skilled at it, within a quick amount of time. Turning what was meant to be something I could do to pass the time for a while as Jane and Julius finished their business into something I genuinely enjoyed and spent a number of years doing. I started going all over Rome and Italy itself, painting anything and everything I wished. Spending a few years just dedicating myself to it. Year 1022. At the moment I was playing a game of Nefertafel with King Canute. As to why or how I am currently in the presence of a king and playing a board game with a king, well, for the first time in a while, I decided to actually take part in my bank's business. King Canute was the ruler of parts of Normandy and half of England. And at the moment his kingdom is in a bit of a pinch. The raids from Vikings have drawn significantly from his treasuries, with him having to pay more soldiers than needed, and also employing mercenaries to patrol their costs. And so, he asked our bank for a loan, and of course, we said, sure. So with me back in England, and not doing anything, I decided, why not, and met him in person to straighten out the details of the loan. And through the making of a deal, the two of us actually become friends. King Canute was actually a very interesting person. He was smart, just, and looked out for the people under his rule. Most of the time we just played board games or talked about his lands, and ways he could better help his citizens. To him I was an heir of a chain of banks that spanned different countries. And well, just like any king would do, he asked me if I wished to be a duke of his kingdom. But I passed on the offer. The idea of being held down in one place just didn't sit right with me, being tied down where I would have responsibilities and be forced to stay and take care of my lands, was something I tried to avoid. King Canute moved one of his pieces on the board, leaving himself open for defeat. Leaning forward in my chair, I moved one of my own pieces, taking out one of his and putting him at a loss. You always win, when will you ever let me win? King Canute said playfully. When you are skilled enough to beat me. I responded jokingly. King Canute scoffed and took a sip from a goblet of wine. I will be having dinner with my wife Emma this evening, would you like to join us? He asked me. I shook my head. As pleasant as that sounds, I must be off, I said standing from my chair. Of course. Canute said standing from his own chair to see me off. Leaving for home, I looked up at the cloudy sky, and let out a small sigh, it looks like it will rain again. I thought, as my horse was brought to me, by one of the servants. Making it home 2 hours later, I managed to beat the rain by mere minutes. Taking my horse to the stable, I took off the saddle and fed him before entering my cozy home. Stepping through the door, I saw Julius sitting in his reclining chair reading a very familiar book. Looking up at seeing me enter, Julius snapped the book closed and looked up at me. Raising my hands I said. I had nothing to do with it. Lifting the book, Adam spoke. Oh, you mean the fact that you are in a religious book as the first human? I shrugged. What can I say? I didn't tell them to add me to their religion, they just did. I said with a shrug. But is it possible that you are the first human? Julius asked. I tilted my head. What do you mean? That you are the first human? You said you don't remember anything when you first woke up all those years ago, is it possible you are the first human? Julius asked with a serious expression on his face. Oh, for fuck's sake. I thought. No, I'm not the first human, Julius, whoever wrote it probably heard about me, and added me to the book. I don't know if you remember, but I was quite the legend back in the day, heck they even put the name everyone gave me back then into the book. I said. You mean the white-haired wanderer? Julius asked. Yes, and plus it said God gave Adam a mark of immortality, have you seen anything on me? I asked Julius. Julius furrowed his brow. No, but it's not like you walk around nude that often. Julius, I don't have any markings on me. I said with a huff. Julius shrugged, then with an evil smirk asked. So how does it feel to be a part of one of the biggest religions in existence? I let out a long sigh as I took off my cloak to hang it by the door. It feels like one massive annoyance, that's what it feels like. It could be worse, people could be praying to you. Julius said with a chuckle. Don't say that, you are going to give me a migraine. Julius let out another chuckle. Looking around the room I asked Julius. Where is Jane? Julius looked up from the Bible he had reopened to continue reading. She's in the basement, reading your old journals. She can read those. I wrote those in Phoenician, how can she read them? I asked. You did, but you also wrote a translation key, in Latin, which she can read. He said. She has been learning from it, so she can read your older journals. He said, going back to reading the Bible. Shrugging my shoulders, I leaned back in my chair and relaxed into the soft leather. POV, unknown. Place, dark cell. In a dark cell, deep under the ground, where no light shone, the sound of someone murmuring couldn't be heard, bouncing off the walls of the cell and echoing down the dark and wet corridors of the underground prison. I will get my revenge. I will make him pay. I will kill him, take away everything that was important to him, Adam will pay. Said a voice that sounded deranged, over and over again, on a constant repeat. Laying off to the side of the cell was a bowl with small streaks of blood, left behind from the inmates feeding. Not enough to be strong, but just enough to survive. He will pay, he will pay, he will pay. The inmates screamed out, as the madness continued to take their mind from them with every passing second, from the lack of blood, and the pain of loss. I will make him pay, the voice said in a whisper, before finally going silent. A plan. Year 1200. Well, I'm on the run, or hiding at the moment. I know, who would have thought people from the Middle Ages would be smart enough to put the dots together, that me, a simple man, is the Adam from the Bible. Well, it started with people starting to stare at me more and more, which isn't something new, for as long as I can remember since I came to this world, I have been stared at any time I'm in public. With my pale white flawless skin, and silky smooth white hair, I have always been an oddity to people. Hell, my height alone sets me apart from the rest of the world. At over 6 feet tall when everyone else alive is on average 5 feet 6, I was virtually a giant in their eyes. But as to why I'm on the run, well, people seem to be angered at the fact that I ate from the forbidden tree, and damned humanity to the world they live in. Which is total bullshit. If I was the real Adam, they shouldn't hold me totally responsible. Eve ate from it first, sure the Adam from the Bible fell to temptation and also ate from the tree, but if only she was banned from the garden, none of them would exist at all, so they should be grateful, too. The fictitious Adam, that isn't me, or well is me, but morphed into a religion to explain the origin of mankind, or maybe I just share the name with the real Adam, and this is all just one big misunderstanding, right? Well, anywho. After I got word from my bank head in England that people were starting to get suspicious of me, I decided to take a trip somewhere else for a generation or two, while I wait for those that are suspicious of me to die, so I could return back to England. Something I also learned from this whole thing is I needed to dye my hair for a while, to hide from people a little more than I have been. And hopefully by myself some time while I come up with a plan of where I'm going to go. To dye my hair I used ground up coal and honey, to dye my hair. I would like to say it was a massive success and it worked perfectly. And well, it did, sort of. The coal turned my hair a medium gray color and not the black I was going for, but it was acceptable. Now, not completely sticking out like a sore thumb, I had to figure out what I'm going to do for the next 80 grueling years. I asked Jane and Julius if they wanted to come with me, but they said they were traveled out. How preposterous of them, I did it way longer than them, and I never got bored of it, although that might have something to do with my emotional dampeners, which dampen any feelings I might have, which would drive me nuts, like boredom or complete sadness. Who cares, it's been a while since I did something on my own anyway. I thought. So now I just need to decide what I'm to do. At the moment, I'm sitting on a wooden box, in a dock in London, looking around the busy port. I watched as people came and went, kids, women, and men. All going about their daily travels, as I sat watching, and slowly kicked my feet back and forth on the box. Thankfully they don't stare at me so much anymore with my new hair color. I thought with a rueful smile. Looking up at the squawk of a bird, I started to think again. What is happening in the world right now? I wondered. Better question, what isn't happening right now? You have Khan about to start his reign of conquest, the Fourth Crusade is about to happen, and most of the world is in a state of flourishment. I continued to think while I sat, hunched on the wooden box. I haven't given being a soldier a try yet, and it would be cool to ride with the great Khan in his conquest, so why don't I do both? I thought as a smile slowly grew on my face. First I would try soldiering in the Crusades first, since this round of it will start in 1202, and Genghis Khan will start his main advancement somewhere around 1209, so that will give me a few years to toddle around as a soldier, then I can ride with the Mongol hordes. Making my way to my bank in London I slowly wandered to muddy streets filled with common folk. At the moment London boasted a population of around 30,000 people. Not massive like some places like Rome, Hangzhou, Constantinople, and definitely not Baghdad, which had around 1 million people in that one city alone. But it was a respectable amount. Walking down the streets, I looked around at the homes that went up to 3 stories high. I always loved seeing those homes, they always reminded me of Diagon Alley from Harry Potter, with their crooked and leaning look to them, as well as the fact they were built to overhang the streets below, making them all the more dangerous and cool looking. Finally making my way to the bank, I stopped and stared at the opulent stone building. The bank was mostly made out of stone, with a clay roofing, which should protect it from any fire that will go up in this city in the next couple of years. The bank wasn't as pretty as some of my other banks in larger cities like Rome and Alexandria, but it did have its charms. The bank was about 90,000 square feet, and had 5 steps that led up to the large steel doors of the bank, which was guarded by 8 heavily armed and armored men, and that's just by the door. I knew that on the inside were almost 50 other soldiers patrolling the bank's ground floor, while in the underground vaults there was a constant rotation of another 30 soldiers. The inside was lit by torches and candles, since there were no windows built into the structure, the main metal doors the only opening for air to enter. But the only reason the people on the inside could breathe was because I had them place metal tubes high up off the ground towards the roof, which allowed air to come in. I also had them do the same for the underground area, all because people in this time period couldn't figure out that there is no air underground. Entering the bank with my gold card in hand, I was shown to the current bank head. His name was Abel Grew, and was a short, thin man that was currently in the final stages of hair loss. Stepping into his small office, Abel practically fell over himself to accommodate me, asking if I would like a drink, or anything under the sun. No thank you, Abel, I just popped by to ask you to do some small things for me. I said to him. Of course, what would you like for me to do for you, sir? I need you to get me a set of chainmail, a helmet, a horse, and a couple of people to carry all of my gear and to polish all of it. I said in one breath. Abel was wide-eyed at my words, as if I was God talking to a mere cow. But hey, I guess since he nodded his head, he got the message. Not wanting to stand here for the rest of the day while the man stared at me, I gave him a small smile and a wave, then headed out. Now, I should have specified the limits of what I asked for. A set of chainmail, which is one set of mail like a shirt. A helmet, which is one helmet. A horse, is a fucking horse. And people to carry and take care of all my gear, should have been maybe 1 or 2 people. Not the small freckin' army I found a few days later waiting for my arrival. And I mean, no less than 100 people. Oh, you have got to be kidding me, I thought as I looked at the mass of people. There were about 40 soldiers in full gear, and about 60 servants that would follow behind us with carts full of supplies. Mentally smacking myself for being slow to the fact that my bank heads see me as a god, and anything I say is gospel, and to not follow my words is sacrilege, and in this point in time, sacrilege is a big no-no. So, facing the music I slowly made my way through the crowd of people and into the bank, while trying to stay invisible. Sitting behind his desk was my good friend Abel, acting as if he did nothing wrong. Closing the door to his office, I turned to look at Abel with a raised eyebrow. Ah, sir, you arrived. He said in a cheerful voice. Yes, I did, I said in a dry tone. Not seeming to hear my tone, Abel continued. Well, sir, if you would follow me, I will show you to Captain Travis. He will. I raised a hand to cut him off. Abel, the other day I meant only a few people to follow me, not a small village. He looked at me confused. But sir, you asked for people to carry all of your supplies. I nodded my head. Yes, 1 or 2 people, not 100 people. Abel raised his hands. I am sorry, sir, I thought this is what you wanted. He said. I let out a sigh. Have they already been paid? I asked. He shook his head. Only half of what they would be getting, the rest they would be paid when all of you returned. He said. Right, like any of them would be alive by the time I returned, I thought. Look, since they won't be leaving with me, just tell them they can keep what they have been paid, and to go home and look for other work, just pick 2 people to carry and take care of my gear, would you? I told him. He slowly nodded his head. Very well, sir, I will do as you ask, he said, and bustled out of the room. So with this chapter I'm building up for the next one, which will be half of the MC being a knight, and the other half, him riding with the Mongols. Adam is going to have his hair dyed for a while, at least until people start to wear those wigs. And let me know if you saw the Adam Sandler movie reference. And please let me know if there are any issues with the chapter. Thanks a ton. Bean. Notice. Hey everyone, I just wanted to tell you I'm going to be taking a small break for a few days to a week. But don't worry, I will return. I'm going to be making some extra chapters in advance, so I won't be rushing all of my chapters like I have been doing from the start. And it will also allow me to make a schedule for chapter releases, instead of me posting them as soon as I am done writing them on my hour lunch breaks. My plan is to make at least 10 advanced chapters to give me some breathing room, and to not keep me stressing about releasing chapters. It will also let me write without making plot holes in the story, as well as allow me to make a better written story, that isn't so jumbled. I have grown as a writer, and I am truly happy I chose to post this story here. Thank you all for your constant support and your patience. Bean. In the dog house, and wolves. Pav Julius. Sitting in his reclining chair, Julius read a rather interesting passage from one of Adam's journals. It was a passage about his journey east, along the Silk Road, and how he started to learn the Asian language on the road. As he was reading, Jane came from their room, also holding one of Adam's old and battered journals. Stopping in front of the fire, Jane turned to look at Julius. Do you think he actually did everything he's written about, and seen all those wonderful things? She asked him. Julius lowered what he was reading and looked at her. I do, you should know Adam isn't one for embellishment, and if anything, he understated most of his writings. Jane raised one of her perfect eyebrows. Really? She asked. Julius nodded his head. In fact, recently, I found out Adam has been hiding a few things from us. He said and shook his head. Jane slowly lowered the journal she had been holding. Like what? She asked him. Julius gnawed on his lip for a moment, while deciding if it was a good idea to tell her. Do you know why Adam decided to leave for a little while? Julius asked her. Something about joining some holy army or something. Jane said with a shrug. He had 3 other opportunities to do that, but now, out of nowhere, he just decides to leave. Julius guided her to a conclusion. Maybe he just became curious. She said questioningly. Julius let out a sigh. He loved Jane with every inch of his heart, but Jane seemed to always be oblivious to things that should be right in front of her. Jane is smart, that there is no doubt, but she seems to look at the smaller picture, rather than the forest through the trees, but Julius was working on that with her. Have you read the Bible? Julius asked her. Jane gave another shrug. A little. Did you get to the part about the Garden of Eden? He asked. She nodded her head. And what were the names of the first humans? He again guided her. Instantly Jane said. It was even Ad. Jane came to a halt. The journal she had been holding slipped from her hands to flop onto the stone ground. Adam. She finished, wide-eyed, and open-mouthed. Julius nodded his head. That's right, our Adam might be the first man, created by God. He said. Jane, still in a state of shock, said. But. Julius raised his hands. I asked him about it, but he refused to confirm the fact. He said he wasn't the first human, but I have read and reread the Bible over and over, and the description of Adam from the Bible matches our Adam perfectly, making it hard for me to believe that he isn't the first human, Julius said. Continuing before Jane could speak, Julius said. But Adam did have a good rebuke, he said. A long time ago he was a well-known traveler, that became something of a myth, called the white-haired traveler, and went from village to village all over the world, helping the sick, as well as being a trader. His journals can confirm that, so it is possible that his legend just got mixed into the Bible, Julius said. I suppose, but Adam also doesn't remember anything from before he woke in that forest, so it is possible, Jane said. Yes, that is true, but our Adam also doesn't have any marks on him, which the Adam from the Bible is said to have. Jane slowly nodded her head. I suppose. After a moment of silence, Jane's eyebrows furrowed. And how long exactly have you known about this? She asked Julius. Julius scratched the side of his head, not because of an itch, but out of habit. Well, about 300 years. He said. 300 years. Jane shouted. Julius raised his hands as if to protect himself from Jane's oncoming vocal attack. You didn't say anything for 300 years. She said angrily. Well, it didn't seem so important, so what if Adam is or isn't the first human? It isn't important, Julius. What is important is that you said nothing for nearly 300 years. Julius slowly lowered his hands and looked at Jane. I'm confused. He said. Well, you shouldn't be. We are going to be together for possibly the rest of eternity, Julius. We need to be open with each other, Jane said sternly. But, Julius managed to get out, before Jane stopped him with a raised hand. No, buts, Julius, you men, she said, before picking up the dropped journal, and storming off, while Julius sat in his chair, confused. Is this what Adam meant, when he said women think differently than men? He wondered as he sat there. What really confused Julius was that she was angry about that, and didn't even seem to care about the fact Adam could possibly be the first human to live, but instead that he didn't say anything to her about it. I should have gone with Adam, Julius thought. Looking into the roaring fire, in the fireplace, Julius spoke aloud. I wonder what he is doing at the moment. Adam Pav. No, The other way, I said, as I showed John how to polish my helmet. At the moment we were about 2 days from Paris, where we would be massing for the crusade. Sitting around a small fire were myself, John, and Henry. The two of them reminded me of Murtaugh and Mulroy from Pirates of the Caribbean. If I wasn't in a separate universe altogether, I would have thought they were them. John looked just like the heavy-set Mulroy, while Henry looked just like the skinny Murtaugh. And even more, they acted just like them. Yeah, you dimwit, the other way. Murtaugh, or Henry said to John, as he sharpened the prop sword I had bought. Turning to look at Henry, the first said, "Quiet you, and start sharpening that blade correctly, instead of just moving the whetstone along the blade. How about you focus on your own task?" I said to him. Now, normally, I am slow to get annoyed, but these two have been bickering non-stop since they were assigned to me. The only reason I accepted them was because they looked like two of the characters from some of my favorite movies, which caused me to, at the time, overlook their annoying tendencies. Sitting back down on a log, I moved my feet towards the fire, and let out a long sigh. I'm already tired of this journey. I thought. It had been a very long time since I had been to Northern Europe, like France, Germany, and all those countries, and instead focused on places like Rome, the Middle East, and Asia, instead. Not out of a hate for these places, but that there was nothing here for me. As we sat, in silence, with only the pops and crackling of the fire for noise, as well as the sounds of Henry and John finishing their tasks, I was finally able to let out a relaxed sigh, as the warmth of the fire washed over me. Crack! My eyes popped open at the sound of a large branch being broken, from somewhere around us. Both John and Henry came to a complete halt, as they too heard the sound. Turning to look in the direction of the sound, I looked into the inky blackness of the surrounding forest. With my eyes, I could see into the forest much better than any normal human could, but not as great as a vampire could. Vampires could see in total blackness, while I needed at least a little light to see, but unfortunately, the night sky was covering the full moon's light, with thick clouds, and the fire we sat by, only made it harder for me to see out, and into the darkness. Turning to look at John and Henry, I said, "Henry, give me my sword, I am going to check out what that sound was." I said, as I put my hand out for my prop sword. I bought the prop sword for its simplicity. I didn't need a master-made blade now that I could use my aura ability to make even a dull blade sharper than anything on this planet, and besides I was going up against humans this time, not vampires. I also didn't bring my own sword this time, because of its uniqueness, which would draw some unwanted looks that I didn't need at the moment. Henry quickly handed over my long sword, while nervously looking around the dark woods. "Yes, sir, here you are," he said while handing it over. As he was handing it over, my ears started to pick up the sound of leaves being stepped on as well as some sticks being stepped on, and alarmingly I could hear all of that, in all directions. We are surrounded. I thought. It must be bandits. But before I could do anything, a gust of wind blew through the camp, bringing a very distinct smell with it. As the smell registered in my brain, a sound traveled from no less than 100 feet from our camp, piercing my ears. How WLLLLL. I turned in the direction of the howl, and readied my blade, waiting to activate my aura. This can't be right, that was way too loud for a wolf. I thought. Turning my head to look at John and Henry, who were now sitting close to each other by the fire, I spoke. "The both of you stay here, and don't do anything stupid," I said, before stepping into the dark forest. Werewolves or demons? Stepping into the woods, I was finally able to see into the forest. With the bright light of the fire to my back, it gave me enough light to see deep into the thick woods. Hearing the sound of rustling undergrowth, I turned to see what was making the noise, and hoping it wasn't what I thought it was. Moving in a blurry streak, a brown-colored creature came straight for me. Not thinking of my actions, I activated my aura ability, and sliced down on the creature as soon as it was close enough for the attack. My new longsword, which was nearly a foot longer than my own gladius sword, gave me the advantage of distancing myself from any attacker, as well as giving me a greater attack range without the need to move, and if this creature is what I think it is, the last thing I needed was to be bitten, or possibly scratched. Yes, my system purged most of the vampiric venom from my body, but it still left a trait behind. Who knows what would happen if a werewolf was to do the same to me, and what trait could be left in me. But with my speed and strength, I should be able to hold off any number that was here. My sword sliced the beast in half, straight down the middle, splitting the beast in two. As the two halves of the beast separated, the momentum of its movement brought the two halves past me, where they hit the ground to my sides. Looking down at one of the halves to my right, I looked down at the creature I had just killed, and when I saw what it was, my stomach dropped. The beast was a mix between human and wolf, with a virile chest and fur covering around 80% of it. Werewolf, I thought. The arms and legs looked to be stretched out and bent in inhumane ways, while its hands were elongated and starched out to clawed-tipped fingers. Using my foot, first rolled the core over to get a look at one half of the face. As I did so, guts and bones sludged out of it to steam on the ground. Ignoring the disgusting insides, I looked the creature over. The face weirded me out to no end. It had a human-like eye that was wide open, and looked to be a mix of light blue and a dark yellowish green, with an elongated mouth that lengthened and turned into that of a wolf, which seemed strange mixed with a human-like cheekbone structure. The face had patches of brown fur and pointed ears that had no hair, and looked like they belonged to a goblin. Fuck, was all my brain managed to get out as I saw for the first time, something I didn't know existed. The movies never said anything about this, just shapeshifters in the Americas, not werewolves. I mumbled to myself as my eyebrows narrowed with concern. I did remember a few times in the movies, the Volturi mentioning werewolves, instead of shapeshifters, which the pack in the movie are. For so long I had yet to see any, until now, so I had assumed that only the Quileute tribe existed, and were the only kind of supernatural beasts besides the vampires. The difference between werewolves and shapeshifters is that shapeshifters are born, while werewolves are created, sort of like vampires are created. Both vampires and werewolves are created by a venom or virus that gets into their bloodstream, and changing them at a genetic level. What can make them so dangerous is that werewolves turn into mindless animals that will kill anything breathing they can find during full moons, and can't turn at will. While shapeshifters are fully in control of themselves, while in their beast forms. Turning my head, I could hear what sounded to me like a herd of animals heading straight for me. Bracing myself for what was more than likely the rest of the pack, I couldn't help but let out a mental sigh, as the problems all of this would bring ran through my head. Now I have to deal with this. I was really looking forward to joining a crusade. Oh well, isn't there going to be more, or perhaps I can eradicate all of the werewolves before it even starts. I thought, as the first werewolf came into my sight. The last thing this world needs is for this to spread uncontrollably around the world. John, Henry Pav. Both John and Henry sat glued to their seated spots as they watched the brilliant light show that was taking place in front of them. Bright purple light streamed through the thick forest, as the sounds of what they could only describe as a pack of wolves fighting and yelping. The noise echoed through the forest and into their camp, leaving both of them scared to their bones. What in heaven is that? John said, in fear and astonishment. It must be the work of the devil. Henry stammered out, as his chest heaved in panic. No, it must be some sort of light Sir Adam is using to see. John said, as he watched the light. Henry looked over at him. He must be one of those witches, or a soldier of the devil. Henry said, with the fever of a true believer. We have been traveling with Sir Adam for a few weeks now, and I'm no slow-minded farmer. I have been to church every holy day, and I haven't seen any signs of him being either a witch or an agent of evil, because I for one, haven't seen him eat a single baby, or devour a soul. John shot back at Henry. Henry let out a gasp. He must have set a spell on you, he said, scooting away from John. But Henry only managed to scoot a little over a foot from John, when something came crashing through the forest and into the middle of their camp. The sound brought them both to a halt, as the core of a strange beast crashed down right where Henry had been seated. Both John and Henry sat in shock, as they got a good look at what had just landed between them. Monster. John said in a panic, as he used his hands to crawl back and away from the beast. While Henry himself did the same, while shouting. It's the spawn of the devil, it's the spawn of the devil. John had backed up to the log Adam had been using before the monster attack, while Henry backed into the cart's wheel. I told you this was a bad idea. Henry shouted, pointing an accusing finger at John. Me, you can't do that, you agreed to come, even after I warned you, that there would be danger on a crusade. John shot back. True, but I was expecting a human enemy, not this. He shouted, gesturing at the core. All the while they argued, the battle continued in the surrounding forest. And the cart horse stood not far away, munching on some dry grass calmly, and without a care in the world. Adam Pav. My sword took off limbs, and sliced through the small horde of werewolves that continued to attack me. Even after 5 minutes of continued slicing and chopping, the werewolves seemed to be unfazed at the destruction I was causing them, and the pile of their bodies I was leaving around me continued to grow. Like crazed beasts, they continued to attack me, but like the rest of their friends, they only got within the range of my sword, before they were killed, with a blow of my blade. What surprised me was the strength and speed these werewolves possessed. If I had to say, they could be on par with the average vampire that is out of their newborn phase. They had the speed to be a blurry motion while running, and from the speed and sound their clawed hands made, when I dodged them, I could tell there was some serious strength behind their hits. Blocking a particularly feral swing, I chopped off the limb, and then the head of the beast. Just like the battle with the vampires, I lost myself in the fight. I didn't want to use my shockwave at the moment, because there wasn't much of a need. At the moment, I was cutting them down with almost complete ease, and didn't find the use of it necessary, and just a waste. In a blur I continued to slice and chop the werewolves into pieces, like a blender. After a few more minutes, the once steady stream of wolves slowed down a bit, until no more were adding to the fight, and I was able to finish off the last remaining werewolves. Breathing a little harder than normal from my exertions, I looked around, and was a bit amazed. In sliced pieces and decapitated corpses, the bodies of no less than 300 werewolves, scattered the woods. A few of the trees had large chunks of bark and wood missing, from when I threw a wolf or two into them, and the ground was soggy from the large amounts of blood that I had just spilled. Just then the clouds began to clear a bit, and let a stream of the moon's light to stream down, and light the forest with its glow. What the fuck? I let out with a sigh. I need to figure out where this is coming from. I thought as I looked down at the wolf I had stepped on. Author's notes. So the MC will still become a crusader, but first he will need to track down where the werewolves are coming from, and who, or what, is turning people. Unfortunately he won't become a Mongol though. Something is going to pop up that will keep him away from doing that, and keep him from destroying the Mongols, for some of the things they had done. By the time he becomes a crusader, it will be when they are leaving on ships to sack Constantinople. I have a good idea for the sacking of Constantinople, where the MC will do something to spread his legend, and maybe a little extra. Werewolves will be eradicated, partly by the MC and the other part by the Volturi. I will do a chapter in the Volturi's POV about their run-ins with werewolves, which will start their hate for them, and by connection, the shapeshifters, that will be in forks. Interestingly, the moon-touched werewolves are as fast, and slightly stronger than a regular vampire, but not on the same level as a newborn. Even so, they are still a real threat to the vampire and human worlds. They are also smaller than a shapeshifter's wolf form, who are on average twice the size of werewolves, but can still hold their own, against either shapeshifters or vampires. This should show how much stronger the MC is compared to the rest of the vampiric and supernatural world. But don't worry, I know he is super OP, but I already have an endgame enemy, who will be on par with the MC, and something or more like someone, I think will surprise all of you. Attempted explanation in a battle of wit. I broke from my thoughts, as the sounds of panicked voices came from behind me, where I had forgotten about my two, very human, and completely normal companions, who were still in the camp. Fuck, I thought, as I remembered their presence. Slowly making my way back to the camp, I started to think of things to say to them, that might explain to them what just happened. Stepping into the small opening, and into the camp's firelight, my presence became known to both John and Henry at the same time. Both of them were in the middle of a rather loud argument, when my blood-covered figure emerged from the dark forest surrounding them. Henry and John both turned to face me and promptly lost their minds. Ah! Henry screamed as he backed away from me, but ended up bumping into the also screaming John, who was standing behind him, causing them to fall to the ground. Don't eat our souls. John cried out, as he covered his face and head with his arms, while Henry used both of his pointer fingers to make a cross, as he prayed loudly. The cacophony of noise they made me wince at their raised, and panicked voices. Looking to the side of the camp, I saw the cart horse munching away at some dry grass. Getting tired of the noise coming from the two, I shouted. Will the both of you shut your air holes? Both of them went dead silent, as they looked at me. I raised my hand, to stop Henry from speaking. Shish, not a word. I said. Shutting his mouth again, I waited to see if either would try and speak again. When neither did, I let out a sigh. At least let me clean up, before the both of you start asking questions. I said, walking past them, and to my previously seated spot. Stepping over the dead body of a werewolf, I sat back down on my log, and started taking off my tunic and other bloody clothes. It took me about 10 minutes before I was charged and cleaned up, using water from our water skins to clean myself. Now, seated by the fire in some clean clothes, I looked over the fire where both John and Henry had seated themselves, right next to each other, neither of them looking away from me. Raising my hands, I said, "Ask away." While I had been changing into some new clothes, I had decided to just tell them part of the truth, because my brain was completely blank, when I tried to think up an excuse for what had happened, and figured, if they were to tell others, they wouldn't be believed. "Are you a soldier of the devil?" Henry asked first. I shook my head. "No, I'm not," I said. "Are you a witch?" John asked. "No, and the male term is wizard. Witches are female, while wizards are male," I said. They both let out gasps. "Only a witch would know that," Henry said, with fear. I looked at him. "I am not a witch, I am human, just like you," I said. "Lear, you be a demon from the fires of hell, sent to destroy us, and eat all of our souls," Henry said. I smacked my forehead, and let out a sigh. "Look, the both of you dimwits, I am not a demon, I am a human, with abilities." "What did you just call us?" John said, angered. "You heard my words, and if you two don't, oh, what's the point? The both of you don't even have a single brain cell between the both of you to make a sandwich," I said, in irritation. "Is that a slur?" John said as he stood to his feet, with Henry hot on his heels to follow his lead. "Because I'll let you know, I've been in a few dust-ups in my time, and I haven't lost a one, but if you slur our mums again, we can have a go," John said, raising his fists, ready to fight. "Yeah, don't slur our mums," Henry added, at John's side, also raising his fists for a fight. I couldn't help but let out a raucous laugh. The two of them looked like children getting ready for a schoolyard brawl. Both of them had their thumbs in their palms, with the rest of their fingers covering them to make fists, and the clear fear in their eyes only made it funnier. Either these two really don't have a brain cell between them, or they have bigger gonads than brains, I thought, as I brought my laughter under control. Don't laugh, your life be on the end of a tether here and now," Henry said, as he moved his fist in a circle. Again I let out a laugh, but while I wiped a tear from the corner of my eye, I slowly stood up and looked at them. I meant no disrespect, I told them. Both John and Henry looked at each other, then back at me. "Really?" Henry said in confusion. I nodded my head. "Really?" At my words, they slowly lowered their hands. "Good," John said, with a sniff, while he crossed his arms over his chest. I let a small smile spread across my face, at his words. "Now, let me put this in a way both of you can understand. Mayhaps God fashioned thee both with the wit of turnips and the visages of mangy curs." Both John and Henry looked to be shell-shocked. "What?" John shouted, with anger, as he rolled up his sleeves, ready for a fight. "Wait, John," Henry said, grabbing a hold of John's arm. Once John had stopped, Henry turned to look at me, then taking a wired pose, with one leg bent, and one hand under his chin, he said, "Thy mind is as dull as a worn-out plow, unable to cultivate a single intelligent thought, but thou, Again I couldn't hold back my laughter at Henry's failed attempt. "You flee, you forgot how it went," John whispered into Henry's ear. Turning to face John, Henry whispered back. I couldn't help it, it was too long to remember. John grabbed Henry by his tunic's collar, and said, "But we've been practicing for nearly a full moon, how could you forget?" He angrily asked Henry. "Like I said, it's too long to remember, and if you wish to belittle me, the least you can do is tell me how it's supposed to go." Henry shot back. "It's supposed to go, it's supposed to go like," John said, as he looked up in thought. Henry pointed his finger at John. "You have also forgotten," he said angrily at John. "Have not," he said back. "Have to. Have not. Have to. Have not," John said, this time pushing Henry back a step. "Have to," Henry said, pushing John back twice as hard. "You little, rotten little," John stammered, as he rushed Henry, tackling him to the ground. All throughout their whispered argument, to their shoving match, and now fight. I had been listening, and laughing like a madman at them, off to the side. Watching them roll around on the ground, I couldn't help but fall over laughing. The two of them were just like little kids. The way they argued, all the way to how they fought each other, I couldn't help but laugh at them. After a minute of rolling on the ground, I finally managed, with a great amount of willpower, to get my laughter under control. Sitting up, I wiped the streams of tears away with the sleeves of my tunic, before standing up again. By this point, both John and Henry weren't even fighting anymore, but were instead, just laying on the ground, breathing hard, and throwing insults at each other. All right, that's enough, we have gone way beyond topic. I said, as I sat back on the fallen log. Slowly, and with a bit of difficulty, John and Henry sat up and made their way back to the fire, where they both plopped back down, both of them still breathing hard. Right, where were we? I asked myself. Witches. John said, as he pulled some grass from his hair. Right, I said, snapping my fingers. Like I had been saying before, I am not a witch nor a wizard, I am human, with a few abilities. Neither John, nor Henry, said anything, and instead stayed silent at my words, both too exhausted from their 3-minute brawl. Very good, any questions? I asked. What abilities do you have? Henry asked. Good question, well, I'm stronger and faster than 10 men. I said proudly. Both John and Henry looked at me with unbelieving eyes. Sure. I shrugged my shoulders and stood. Going to the cart, I picked up from the back an axe with a metal top. Going back to my seat, I handed it to them. Is the axe head metal? I asked. Both of them looked at, and then tested the axe, making sure it was real. After a few moments, they handed it back. It's real, Henry said. Good, I said simply, before grabbing the top with both hands, and twisted. The axe head turned, as if it was rubber in my grip, before it broke in two. Both John and Henry stared wide-eyed and open-mouthed at what I had just done. My goodness, John said in amazement. After a moment of silence, John asked. If you were a regular man like us, then how did you get your abilities? He asked with a raised eyebrow. This is where I was going to use their faith against them. With a wide smile, I said. God. Both of their eyes went wide. God. Both John and Henry wide-eyed said in unison. I nodded my head. That's right, I said with a smile. Henry leaned over to John and whispered into his ear. Don't listen to him, it's all lies, he must be a demon from hell sent to test our faith. As long as we stay true, God will protect us. He said, nodding his head. I couldn't help but smack my forehead again. This is going to be a long night, I thought, before speaking again. And just decided to use the biggest card I had. I am, the Atom, card. Another chapter down. A.N. This chapter shows how dim-witted both John and Henry can be, but to be fair most people of the time would probably act the same in their circumstances, minus the whole word bit, that just shows how goofy they can be, and acts as a kind of character development for the two in later chapters. Of course they will only be in this mini arc, but who knows, they might reappear in another adventure down the road. In the next chapter the MC is going to start the hunt, so stay tuned for the next chapter. A quick lesson then reveal. Okay look, I have some questions to ask, I said. John, you said you went to church every holy day, correct? I asked him. He nodded his head. We both did, he said, pointing his thumb at himself then Henry. Good, I said standing up. So, the both of you know a good bit of the Bible? I asked. Both of them nodded. And so the both of you know how mankind came to be on earth? I asked. Yes, we do, Henry said. Then you know of Genesis? I asked. The creation of earth, heaven, hell, Adam and Eve. I continued. Of course we do, just like any God-fearing man on his earth should. Henry said, while straightening his back proudly. I nodded my head, and bent down to grab a burning piece of wood from the edge of the fire. And what does Genesis tell you about Adam and Eve? I asked, while waving the piece of wood through the air, and allowing some embers to fly off into the air. Well, it says Adam was created from the dust of earth, to be in the image of God, then have life breathed into him. John said, leaning back on his hands. Correct, I said pointing the still burning stick at John. Turning it to point at Henry the first asked. And what of Eve? She was created from one of Adam's ribs, when God saw that Adam needed a companion. Very good, I said, putting the stick partially back into the fire. The reason I was asking them all of these questions was because if I was to just come out and say, yeah you know that guy you currently think helped doom you to your miserable life here on earth, when you could be in Eden without any fears, yup, that's me, Adam, the Atom. They either wouldn't believe a word I said, or would hate me, and run away, which wouldn't be the worst thing that could happen, but what can I say, I've become attached to the two morons. They just had this way of being annoyingly funny. But my plan now is to paint my alter ego, Adam, in a better light, and correct them in their thinking. Because just like back in London, They believed Adam and Eve are the sole reason for being kicked from Eden, and the serpent that convinced them takes the back seat in their thoughts, to be forgotten, even though it is the serpent which caused all of it. Thankfully, I only need to convince 2 people and not a city. And why did Adam and Eve get banished from Eden? I asked. Oh, I know this one. John said excitedly. They ate from the tree of knowledge, disobeying God's command, and condemning man. I nodded my head. So, do you blame them for doing so? I asked. Of course we do, Henry said, in an angry voice. Oh really? And why did they eat from the tree when they clearly knew not to? I asked them. Both of them went silent, clearly thinking hard. I waited for a moment, but they were clearly having trouble. I let out a small sigh. The serpent, I said. Ah, that's right, Henry said, wagging a finger in the air. And what did the serpent do? I asked them. It told Eve to eat from the tree, John said, in a self-assured manner. And, I said, waving my hand for him to continue. And what? He asked. Oh, so you think the serpent just said, hey, do you see that tree over there, the one God said not to eat from, you should go and eat from it, and Eve just said, okay. And went to eat from the tree? I asked them. Both of them stared at me. Well, yeah, Henry said with furrowed brows. I shook my head at his words. Who is the serpent? I asked. The devil, John asked, in a questioning tone. That's correct, I said. The master of all that is evil, deceptive, deceitful, a liar. Do you think he told the truth when he told Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge? I asked. No, both John and Henry said in unison. That's right, no, he didn't. The serpent, who is the devil, engaged Eve in a conversation, questioning and distorting God's command not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The serpent deceived Eve into believing that eating from the tree would not lead to death but would make her like God, knowing good and evil. I said. Both John and Henry took on contemplative looks, as they thought on my words. So it's not Eve's or Adam's fault for eating from the tree, John said, while rubbing his scruffy chin. Correct, they were misled into believing it wasn't bad for them to do so. I said. They nodded their heads. Why do you bring all of this up? Henry asked, confused. I raised my hand. I'm getting to that, I said. Leaning back down, I grabbed the stick I had placed back into the fire, and took it out. Now, what happened once Adam and Eve were banished from Eden? I asked. Well, Adam worked the land while Eve had to bear children. John said. Correct, then what? I asked, really starting to get into my teacher mode. Well, Adam worked the land, while Eve had 2 sons. Henry said. Would you look at that, the 2 of you are smarter than I was giving you credit for. I said jokingly. Before either could get angry, I continued. And what happened to the 2 sons, Cain and Abel? I asked. They worked the land with their father Adam. John said. Yes, but what happened to them? I asked. Oh, Cain killed his brother in a fit of jealousy, becoming the first to kill another human. Henry said. That's right, I said. But Adam, their father, saw this happen, and in a rage, killed Cain, becoming the second to do so. Henry added. And who also saw this happen? God, he saw it happen. John said. And what did he do to Adam? He cursed Adam, with immortality, and to be a wanderer. Henry said. Do you think Adam deserved it? I asked them. Both of them took on looks of thought. I don't, John said. A few moments later, so did Henry. Neither do I, he said. A small smile appeared on my face. And why is that? I asked. Well, if I had been in his place, I might have done the same. Henry said. I as well. John added. Very good. So they don't mind what Adam did to his other son. It was the whole eating from the tree of knowledge, and being banished from Eden that held them back from accepting that neither Adam or Eve are bad. I thought, as the small smile on my smile slowly grew. Waving the burning stick around again, my eyes followed the small flames that burned the top half of the stick. What do the 2 of you think he is doing now? I asked. Just what God cursed him to do, wander. John said with a shrug. I let out a chuckle. Yes, I think so too, never able to stay in one place for long before becoming unsatisfied, and bored, before a need to wander starts to take hold, and a need to move takes over. I said. Looking down at John and Henry, I saw that they were both looking at me confused. That's why I brought all of this up. I said. Both John and Henry looked at each other. I'm lost. John said, raising an eyebrow. The reason I brought all of that up is because, well, I said, breaking off. Here goes nothing, I thought. I am, the Adam from the Bible. I said, dropping the stick to the ground and reaching my whole hand back into the fire and grabbing one of the logs that was bright red. The flames burned into my flesh, and made a steaming sizzling sound as my flesh was burned when I grabbed onto the large log. The pain was intense and hurt like hell, but was gone as soon as it came, my flesh healing faster than I was being burned, and instead of pure pain, it only felt like the prickly feeling you get when a limb has fallen asleep. Looking at both John and Henry the first saw they watched my actions with bewildered and shocked looks. Waiting a moment to let what I had just done sink into their minds, I removed my hand from the red, burning, fire, and raised the log in my hand up for both of them to see. Sorry about the late post, work was crazy yesterday and I forgot to set this chapter to auto-post itself. If there are any problems with the chapter please let me know. Word 1527. A.N. There is a reason why they need to know the MC is Adam for later chapters. Question. So this is out of my own curiosity, as well as a need for your input for my next fanfic. Currently I'm still writing this fanfiction full-time, and won't fully start another FIC until this one is done. But I would like to ask what you would like as my next fanfiction. Asking now, will give me time to look into, and plan, what the next story will be about. Here is a small list of some of the ones I strongly suggest as a choice. I won't write anime, I couldn't give those shows the writing they deserve, and I'm 99.9% sure I couldn't do it properly. So I will stick to shows or video games. Red Dead Redemption 2-1. Lucifer, Netflix show. Ragnarok, Netflix show. Really hoping this one so I could give it an ending it truly deserves. Assassin's Creed, Unknown Witch. Hunger Games, movie, 1-4. The Good Doctor. Show. Peaky Blinders, show. The Sopranos, show. Kingsman. Mafia, game Unknown Witch. Sherlock, movie of show your choice. The Ridiculous Six, movie. The Dirt, movie, heavy music. Sex Ed, Netflix show. Star Wars, The Force Awakens, already have an idea for this one. Harry Potter. Movies. We'll add more at a later time. Other. I would like to do one that hasn't been done before on this site, instead on the same thing reused over and over again, because after a while they all seem to be the same. If you have any ideas share with me and I will add it to the list if it resonates with me. I 100% will finish the Twilight FIC and won't rush it, this is just to give a good heads up for what I might write next. Bean. The Village. Quick note, I plan to post a chapter before his one, but when I went to copy from Google Docs, so I could paste in webnovel to post, I accidentally hit cut instead of copy, so I accidentally deleted the chapter. I'm pretty sick right now and teared, so, yeah, I'm going to post this now, and come up with something for the next chapter to fill in the gaps. I just really wanted to at least post one, since I haven't for a few days. Sorry about that. Currently, I was making my way through the forest on my own, following the clear tracks that the werewolf pack had left behind them. The tracks were clear to just about anyone who would see them, be they experienced trackers like myself, or any blundering fool who came across them. With foliage and small trees trampled, it gave the perfect direction to head in. As I followed the tracks at a steady pace, I couldn't help but think back to last night when I told both John and Henry that I was the Adam from the Bible. And just like them to do, they didn't fully believe a word that came out of my mouth, no matter what I said, or, more like, John believes me, while Henry is stuck, and thinks that I am using black magic. I knew no matter what I said, he wouldn't believe me, and would just believe I was a witch, so I gave up. Because at least John believed me, and one is better than none. Breaking from my thoughts, I came out of the forest and into a large clearing that had a small village in the middle of it. The village was ramshackle and made from wood, so in other words, just like every other poor village to exist. But what confused me was how quiet it looked. There wasn't a soul in sight, or smoke rising from the village, which is something you would always see in a village. Always there would be at least one stream rising above a village, but here, there was nothing. Slowly making my way towards the village, I opened up all of my scenes for any sign of inhabitants or anything that could tell me what was going on. I knew since the tracks led straight here, that the werewolves I had killed probably all came from this village, or through it. I didn't know if anyone was still here, who could hopefully tell me what had happened. Making my way to the main thoroughfare of the village, I could see a few mutilated bodies scattered about. The bodies looked to have been ripped apart, and eaten in a few places. Not stopping to investigate them, I continued to walk down the middle of the village, listening. As I walked, I stepped over the corpses of animals, and humans alike, all of them ripped to shreds. While I did so, I looked at the shacks and buildings that were on the sides of the main road. Most of them, if not all, looked to have been nearly destroyed, with large holes in their wall or doors. As I got to the far end of the village, I came to the village's church. Just like most villages with one, the church was the biggest and nicest building in the whole village, made of stone, and taken care of. The church stood out. As the biggest building, it also had a large wooden door in the front. At the moment, the large door was open, and creaking loudly in the wind. Not hearing anything, I slowly stepped in, then had to hold a hand over my nose. Shit, was all I managed to get out as I looked over the massacre in front of me. In front of me, was a scene from a horror movie. Limbs and gore covered the entirety of the inside of the church as if everyone was put in a blender. Turning to leave before I got sick from the smell, I heard a soft bump from the side of the church. In a blur, I had my sword removed, and at the ready, with a purple glow lining the blade, facing the noise. Looking over to where I heard the noise, I could see a small wooden cupboard, which was covered with the body of a rather large man, who had his insides torn from his body. Looking around once more and not seeing anything, I slowly made my way to the cupboard, while still keeping my sword ready, for a possible attack. Stepping close to the dead man's body, I pushed him to the side, his stiff body easily rolled away from the cupboard's small doors. Taking a small step back, I waited for something to happen. But nothing did. Narrowing my brow, I spoke in the local dialect. Come out now. I waited a moment, but again nothing happened. Looking at the cupboard, I realized how small it really was. It could only hold maybe one grown person inside, so there was no need for me to be so paranoid, and whoever was in there was probably scared to death. Slowly lowering my sword, I tried one more time before opening the doors myself. I am friendly, I am not here to hurt you, I said, in a softer tone. But again nothing happened. Was I just hearing things? I thought. It might have just been a noise from the man's dead body. I thought, sheathing my sword, and looking at the stiffened corpse of the unburied man. Wanting to be careful anyhow, I stepped closer to the cupboard and bent down to open one of the doors. But before my hand could touch one of the knobs to open it, one of them slowly cracked open. Going dead still, I stared at the small door as it slowly opened. Taking a step back, I watched the small door open to reveal a small figure inside, but then the other door opened up, and another even smaller figure was revealed. Kids. I slowly put my hands up, as I saw them, and they saw me. Hello, I said softly. From the look of it, they were two boys, between the ages of 3 and 4 years old. Both of them were curled up with their knees to their chests. And the fear in their eyes hurt to see. It's okay, you can come out, I am a friend, I said to them, as I raised my hands. Both of them were hesitant to come out, which I could understand, but eventually, they slowly crawled out. Both of them looked to be wearing nothing but small tunics, and had no footwear, to protect their feet, from the blood that covered the ground. Still with my hands slightly up, and with my palms facing them, I let a wide smile appear on my face, to put the kids at ease. Hello there, I said, with a chuckle. Neither of them said anything, and instead, their eyes slowly started to look around the gore-covered church. Not wanting them to be completely messed up from their experiences of the last day, I slowly moved to them and put my hands on their shoulders, which did gain their attention. Let's get the two of you out of here, I said to the two quiet boys, as I picked them up, one with each arm, and took them outside. Both boys seemed to be brothers, both had shaggy sand blonde hair, with light blue eyes. The only difference was one of them looked to be just a year older than the other, maybe around 5 years old. Stepping through the still open wooden door, I brought both boys out, and into the light of day. Both of the boys scrunched their faces at the bright light, as I brought them into the open. Walking to the side of the church so the dead bodies that littered the street of the village wouldn't be in their view, I set them down. There ya go, I said, as their feet hit the ground. Looking at them both, I could see the dark rings that hung under their eyes, showing their exhaustion. I bet both of you are hungry, huh? I asked them. Both of the boys nodded their heads at my words. Right, I said, wishing I had brought my pack with me. Looking around again, I knew for a fact that there wouldn't be any other survivors of this village, including the two boys' parents. Okay, look, I said, regaining their attention. We are going to my camp. I have food and a place for you to sleep there, okay? I said to them, but both boys seemed too tired to even hear my words. Right, I said, as I picked the two boys up, and started making my way back to camp. I wanted to run, but at my fast speed, I was just as likely to accidentally break their necks than anything, so instead I started a light jog. Thankfully the camp was only a little over 10 miles from the village, and gave me time to think about what I had just seen. So the wolves didn't come from that village, but instead, came from somewhere else. I thought. That village's population, at max, was a little over 100. And from the massacre from inside the church, I could tell, no less than half the village was killed there alone, while a good number littered the road, meaning the rest were probably killed in their homes. All of this slightly worried me. Where are they coming from? When I saw the village, I was hoping to find an empty village, which would have meant that the village is where the werewolf virus had broken out, but since the wolves came from somewhere else, that could be a problem. Who knew if there were wolves who separated from the group to infect others, and spread the lycanthrope virus? As I ran the first look down at the two boys who were in my arms. Both of them were sound asleep, with their heads resting on my shoulders. A pang of sadness ran through me at the idea of these two young children having to experience what they must have. Both of them, in the cupboard, having to hear everyone they ever knew being torn apart by beasts. That I couldn't even imagine, and something I hoped, their minds to forget. This won't be like the village in Romania. The reason the MC felt bad about that is because he caused that to happen, so he felt bad because of the deaths he accidentally caused. So this arc won't be all, I swear to destroy you, kind of arc, but he will try and end what is causing innocent people to die. I wrote this one on some medicine, which makes you tired, so if I missed anything, sorry about that, and I will try to fix it as soon as possible. As always, thanks for your support. I checked the clipboard for what I accidentally deleted, but apparently since I didn't copy it all before deleting it by accident, it can't be found in the clipboard history. Bean.